Good Monday morning. Thank you all for being here, especially on a Monday after the time change. I appreciate your fortitude. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways, and Means Committee to order for March 15th, 2021. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Campbell, Camper, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gantz, Garrett, Gillespie, Hawk, Hicks, Lamar, Lamberth, Lynn, Miller, Ogles, Sexton, Shaw, Sparks, Todd, Whitson, Williams, Wendell, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chairman Hazelwood. Madam
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any personal orders or announcements? Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am pleased to say that I have a very, very special guest with me, Miss Allison Lamberth, who is my daughter. She's 12 years old. She's on spring break. Please make her welcome.
Welcome, Allison. We're glad that you're here. Sorry that I know most parents take their children to beach trips and other things for spring break, but your dad brought you to the legislature. So, but we are glad to have you here. Any other personal orders or announcements? Seeing none. We have several budget hearings scheduled today. Committee members, it's going to be another marathon. We can see the finish line though. We're getting closer. And the first up this morning is the Department of Children's Services. And let me just tell everybody, remind you, you have this information from the presentations is loaded on your dashboard, so you have access to it that way. And this department and probably others will have it on the screen as well. So without objection, we'll go out of session and we'll hear from the Department of Children's Services. And Commissioner, thank you for being here this morning, and we will just let you get straight to your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Jennifer Nichols, Commissioner over the Department of Children's Services, Chairman Hazelwood and Vice Chair Baum and members of the committee. It's great to be with you here today. Thank you for allowing us to present our proposed budget for fiscal year 2022. Just as a precursor to our presentation, I just want to point out we have so many exciting things going on. It is on. Thank you for telling me. Is this better? Okay. We have so many exciting things going on in the department right now that I just want to highlight a couple of them. One being the implementation of the Family First Service Act as of July the 1st, which is a big deal, a big piece of federal legislation that changes public child welfare across the country. We're excited about Governor Lee's and our own department's focus on foster care and adoption, and an initiative called Tennessee Fosters Hope, which is where we have many community partners such as Show Hope, Tennessee Kids Belong, many businesses, and faith-based communities. We have had a dramatic increase in the number of children that have reached permanency through subsidized permanent guardianship. Because remember, there's three ways. We reunify children with their biological families. Children are adopted, and then for some families, it's a better fit to go through the permanent guardianship. And we've had an increase of 13% that we're really proud on. Also, the impending completion of our fiscal enhancement to our own case management system, which sort of is going to revolutionize in a way, the way we do business. And that's coming up in the end of the month or the beginning of April. It's an honor to serve this state and to serve the 8,832 children that are in state's custody, and to serve the additional 18,000 that we serve that aren't in state custody. And we do that with about 3,500 employees spread across all 95 counties, 52 to 5,300 certified foster homes, and dozens of community partners. And all of the things I'm going to talk about in the presentation, it is not lost on me. And in fact, I had an opportunity to speak to Representative Shaw and to Leader Lamberth right before the hearing. All of these things that we want to do, please know that this department recognizes we do nothing without you. It takes you, your interest, your vote, to provide the resources to the 8,800 children in state's custody and the 18,000 that we serve that are not. And with that, I will begin our presentation. I won't spend a lot of time on the numbers because I've just told you what they are. 8,832 in state's custody, but I want to point out that those are broken down into two populations. One, dependent and neglected children in foster care, which is 8,238, and the second being those that are juvenile justice involved, 594. And if you look to the other side of this slide, you'll see how our numbers have changed from a year ago. And we're down about 500 overall in state's custody, but the biggest drop is the number of children that are in our custody that are juvenile justice involved. We've dropped from 854 all the way down to 594, and that's a big shift. This next map, I know you can't see it, but what I hope you can do, we've put the numbers in every single county of children that are in foster care and children that are juvenile justice involved that are in our custody. And so I always find it interesting to look, and people always ask, but we do track it, and on any given day can tell each of you how many children we have in both populations in every single county. And one other number sort of to make note of is, people often ask about COVID and any impact that it may have had on our department. What we've seen is a 15% decrease in the number of child abuse hotline referrals. At one point last summer, it was up to about 30%, but it started to climb back up towards the middle of the summer. And thankfully, I believe we're getting closer to being on par. I mentioned to you that permanency is critical to our department. That's what we're all about. And we were happy to report that last calendar year, our adoption numbers were bigger than they were the year before. So that's a testament to both our case managers, our caseworkers, as opposed to the courts, because we went up from 1,166 to 1,186, and that was doing a whole lot of them by Zoom, but we still got them done, and we're really proud of that. And we're also proud that same time frame, our numbers went up for permanent guardianship, and we went up from 387 to 431. And remember, that's just as permanent. It's just for some families that works better than doing the adoption route. And that brings us to the department has received federal funds from two pieces of federal legislation to assist us with increased costs associated with the pandemic and to better serve children and families. The first is the Family First Corona Response Act. And we have, what that is, it provides a 6.2% increase in the federal medical assistance percentage, that the FMAP that we receive. So same services, they just have given us 6.2% increase. We found out there's no limit. In other words, they'll give us that 6.2 extra, and at this point, there's no end date for it. The amount we've received as of December the 31st of last calendar year was $9,645,000 increase. And the second piece of legislation was the CARES Act money that you hear a lot about on the news. It's a one-time federal award of a little over $1 million. Now, initially, we spent about $139,800 on PPE and other supplies and services for families during COVID. Our goal was to spend that money on a short-term residential facility for dependent and neglected children that were COVID positive. Because as they come into custody and you're looking for a place for them, and we did get children positive pretty frequently. We were looking for a place that we could put them. And it took several months, but one provider agreed to do it, and we got it up and running. Took till about December. And about that time is when our COVID numbers started going way down. So we haven't had to spend the rest of that money, the CARES Act money, for that project. So we are currently working on several different options for the best use of the money. It has to be spent by September the 30th. And when we get a plan, if you are interested, we would be very happy to send you that plan so that you can see what we're going to do with the remaining of funds from the CARES Act. And the next slide shows our proposed budget by program area. The department, I'm proud to say, as you can see, and I think the blue section, that we maintain less than 7% overhead. So $67.1 million of our $993 million budget is used for administration. And the family and management portion of the funds the salaries for our case managers. So you'll see that's a big one, that orange section. And our regional administrators. And that you saw in the map, our state is divided up for DCS to 12 different regions. So the regional administrators also funded out of that particular portion of our budget. The family support services portion funds our prevention services for at-risk, non-custodial kids. Remember, I said we serve 18,000 that are non-custodial, and support services for those children comes out of that section or breakout of our pie chart. We expect that with the implementation of Family First on July the 1st of this year, that will increase, because the whole purpose of that legislation is to keep children out of custody, meaning we will be serving more children and families that are not in custody. The custody and services portion of the graph represents what we spend on treatment for, just as I said, those kids in custody. And payments made to families that have children in foster care or subsidized guardianship. And the adoption assistance and subsidized permanent guardianship portion represents the payments made to adoptive and permanent guardianship, subsidized permanent guardianship families. And we've put the amount beside each of those sections. You'll see the biggest one, the custody services, is 41%, or $407 million. And then the other large one, the orange one, the child and family management, is 28% of our budget, or $285 million.
Commissioner, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we do ask folks to do a 10-minute overview, and we're kind of pushing that
Okay.
window. We have a lot of questions I think we want to get to. So if you could just kind of hit the highlights.
I will.
Thank you.
So the next slide, I'll skip over. You guys have it, but it's a breakout of the various funding sources that we have. The bottom line is only 38.5% of the entire budget comes from state appropriations. The next slide shows our vacancy reductions. You'll see 3 different places that we found vacancies. The important part, for a total of 32 vacancies, the important part of this is just please know that none of these are case managers, because we get asked that a lot, and none of them are case managers. For the most part, they were administrative, or we transitioned from, none of them were case managers, and I'm trying to do highlights. The next page are proposed reductions. You will see 4 proposed reductions that for a total savings of $1,748,000 of total state savings, and to reach our targeted state 2% of $1,131,000. And those came from administrative contracts that we absorbed them in-house, as well as not going forward with the pilot program that we had used before. And then the 2021 reductions, you can see those. They're broken down into, I think there's 6 of them. I will skip them from now, but we can go over them if you have questions, because we have the breakdowns for what they are. And finally, a summary of our proposed cost increases. You will see we're asking for a total of $28.5 million of cost increases, all going directly to serve or support children and families and to increase the salaries of our case managers and our private provider rates. So those are the three buckets that these go to. And again, I can go through each of them individually if someone wants me to. And finally, our last slide is in a capital improvement 2022, and it's Wilder. We're excited about that. John Wilder is our hardware secure facility that's owned and run by the state in Fayette County. The request includes a $13.5 million request to begin the planning and development of a new Wilder facility that will be built on the same property, just at a different location. And I can talk more about that if you guys want. And I am ready for questions.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I'm sorry to rush you through that, but as I said, we
ma'am.
do have a number of questions, and everybody does have this, and I would encourage members who we probably will not get through all of the questions today, and we will be sending those, any additional questions that we don't have, if you will get them to my office, then we will forward them to the department, and we will collect them and get back all the answers to all questions, because if you have a question, there's probably someone else who'd be interested in that as well. But to begin, we have Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you being here today. I think the department is asking for a little over $5.5 million total to adjust case manager salaries to align with the Southeast Region Market Study. How large of a salary increase will this result per case manager? Roughly.
We have 4 levels of case managers. Case managers 1, 2, 3s, and 4s. A case manager 1, our minimum salary is $31,644. And these are, every single one of them has a college degree and very often a master's degree. We looked at Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Iowa, Indiana, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Oklahoma. Their average is $35,895. So there's a deficit of $4,251 if you look at those states. Once you've been with the department a year and have made it through your probationary period, you automatically become a case manager 2. We looked at fewer states in that one because it's more difficult to match services, but those states that we did look at, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Indiana, and Iowa, they have a minimum average of $40,472 as compared to our $33,200. So the deficit grows to $7,200. Case manager 3s, our minimum is $36,636. We again looked at Alabama, Georgia, Iowa, Indiana, Kentucky, and Oklahoma. Their average is $43,900. Deficit still growing, $7,315. And finally, case manager 4s, our minimum is $38,472. We looked at Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Iowa, Indiana, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Oklahoma, and their average start $46,698. Deficit continued to grow to over $8,000. So if the General Assembly approves this ask, we are working on a number of different plans for how we would spend the money. Do we bring everyone up, to the minimum? And if you were already making above that minimum average, you don't get one. Do you do it across the board? So there's several different ideas that we're looking at and trying to, if we get it, spend it equitably, trying to get all of our case managers up to the minimum of these other states.
So there's not a specific amount each one would get in a given class then,
Well,
so far?
not yet.
Okay, you're working on a plan.
Waiting to see if it's approved and what is approved before. We wouldn't want to put that information out there
Okay.
when we don't know,
Okay,
what we might get.
all right. What's current turnover rate for that, any of these positions?
For case across the board, the case manager turnover rate, and actually I misspoke before the Senate and I went back and corrected it with the chairman and his committee members because I'd been given some information that sounded and should have been too good to be true. They said 2%, but that was just for 1 month this year. And we did correct that, but fiscal year 21 from July of last year to February is 14%. And that's pretty in line with the preceding years. Fiscal year 18, it was 13%. 19, it was 17%. 20, it was 18%. And we're now at least at 14%. And truthfully, thank you for asking, because if we want to recruit and keep them, we have to pay them. We have to pay them, a rate that makes them want to stay with our department.
Madam Chair? Thank you. Sorry for not going back through you a moment ago. The last thing I want to ask about was basically the caseloads. I know we understand that there's some caseworkers that are juggling as many as 20 cases at a time, even though the average to me, based on the numbers you gave, looks like that should be around 5. So is that too much? And what's being done about that caseload for some of those?
Well, we are required by law for every region to have an average caseload of 20. Is that correct? Yeah, 20 per case manager. It's like any other thing we work on. If you guys only had one of these budget hearings or 2, imagine how much time you'd be able to give to that one. But when you have 20 and you're splitting your time and your mental energy, of course, it's harder. So do we need more case managers? Of course. But, we have vacancies right now. We have 254 vacancies in our case manager pool, and that is out of 2,841. So if we could recruit, retain, and you do that by, a number of different approaches, which we're trying, support, mentors, asking for pay increases, you just have to hope that you get the right people and they stay with us. There's a statistic that's out there that says every time a case manager leaves, that the child that they are working for permanency, in other words, working for reunification or a foster family, or an adoptive family or a subsidized permanent guardianship, their permanency is delayed by 6 months every time one leaves, because you have to get a new case manager in there to learn it. And I mean, that's the bottom line. That's the part that hurts.
Chairman Todd. And I guess I'll just have a follow-up because I want to make sure I understand. The statute requires 20 per case manager.
An average of 20
An average of
per
20.
region. So we have these 12 regions that are on that map. And if you look at that, and that's the way we look at it per region, an average of 20.
All right, so we're meeting that overall goal because we're required to, but with the vacancies, there's some case managers obviously who are going to have more than that.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Next on our list is Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wanted to ask you about the Safe Baby Courts. The proposed budget has $175,000 recurring state funding for the existing Safe Baby Courts to provide services to drug-exposed children and their families. How will this money be distributed? And also, the Safe Baby Courts, they are part of the judiciary. So how does Children's Services fold in there, especially in regard to this money?
All right. So when the Safe Baby Courts were formed, they were funded at different levels. We now have 12, and was it 18 months ago, maybe?
Yeah.
So 18 months ago, it was brought to my attention by the judges in some of the more rural counties that had them, that they were funded less than some of the urban areas that have more resources. And so Johnson, Coffee, Stewart, Madison, and Grundy were funded at $70,000 apiece. So the department decided that none of them should be funded less than 100%, less than 100,000. So we picked it up and we're going to ask that it become recurring. And that's where you come up with the money that we're asking for. And also Rutherford was increased from 100,000 to 125,000. The way it's folded in, most of these judges have, of course, a number of different dockets. And the Safe Baby Court families are both custodial families, in that pot right now of 8,800 children, and non-custodial. The judges can decide what they're going to do. And they also try and limit the number of cases that they have because these cases stay on their dockets much longer. It's a recovery type court in juvenile court for these babies. And the goal, of course, is to provide enough funding. It's all service related, and most of them, I've been through the population not too long ago, were all drug related. And because of that, we're trying to give the services, the families, the parents, the caregivers long enough to recover. And so they'll stay on there a good long while. And it's the courts that decide how they're going to spend the money. But we put our staff in there, and Muhammad may want to, or Dr. Casey might want to add, sorry. He is sitting to my right. He may want to add something about the Safe Baby Court funding.
Yeah, currently the Safe Baby Court, they all funded.
Sir, if you would, just for the record, your name and your title, please.
Muhammad Al-Casey, Assistant Commissioner of Finance and Budget. So as the commissioner stated, that we did all our best to raise all of the courts to a minimum of $100,000. Some of them went up to 125 because of the urban areas. The funding for all the courts are state funded currently. So we had also some VOCA money that actually helped to provide some support for the court as well, for some other services in addition to the money that we provide for them currently.
Lynn?
So specifically, the money that flows from children's services to the courts, is that providing a liaison from children's services, or is the money literally given to the courts and they spend it as they see fit? What specifically is the money for from children's services that flows to the courts?
Well, they had a good bit of discretion. We had one court, I believe it was Coffee, who purchased a vehicle because a lot of these families had no way to get anywhere. So they chose to use theirs. And some of them, they pay for court personnel devoted to this program. But it's services. I mean, it's all the, drug counseling, it's therapy, it's behavior modification. When the family comes in, I mean, they're assessed pretty rigorously to decide what it is that they actually need.
Are you hearing back from the courts that they are able to service all of the families that could come through the Safe Baby Courts and receive these services? Because I'm a great believer in the program. I think it's a great idea. And I just want to know, are they reporting back to you, yes, we are able to service everyone, or are there some people, well, we don't have room for you, so you're going to go through the other way?
And I have talked to a number of the judges about it, and part of that is why we funded the ones that were at 70, booted them up because they didn't have enough, the resources. And it was interesting because if you're in a more rural area where you don't have as many resources available to you, sometimes it requires more funds to get them or to bring them to you. So that's one reason we did that, because we did hear exactly what you're saying. We can't service enough families. We can't serve the ones we have well. And so we did that. They were pleased with that. I hear a variety. Some of the judges don't want to handle non-custodial, or some of them don't want to handle custodial. And so there's always some give and take in what they perceive to be the most beneficial. Because remember, if one child qualifies to come into Safe Baby Court, and they're just one, and there are other children in that family, they're all served. And that's the advantage of it. So you could have, one 3-year-old that comes in, but if there are siblings that are 5, 6, 7, 12, and they're part of that family unit, it's providing services for them as well.
And I just have a follow-up question there. We have 12 safe baby courts in the state, I believe you said. Is that sufficient, or are we looking at establishing more?
Oh, I'd like to have 95. I mean, seriously. I mean, if you had 95 of them, then it'd be better. How's that? So,
Well, I ask.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, good morning. Thank you
Good
to you
morning.
and your team for all the hard work that you do. Question related to provider rate adjustments. There's a proposed cost increase of $9.6 million in recurring funding to allow for provider rate increases. I know that the increase allows the department to be more competitive in rates related to beds. So with that, and Madam Chair, I do have a couple of questions, but Commissioner, I'll just ask them one at a time so you can respond to them. How often does DCS's need exceed what's been currently contracted with the providers?
Are you talking about the need for like a particular level of service or a bed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Our level of services changes all the time. You could have, we have different level. We have, just like we have different levels of case managers, we have level 1, which is basically children that just need, housing, supervision, food. You have level 2. It's characterized as being a lower level of mental health and behavioral service needs. Mostly level 1s and level 2s usually can be handled in a foster home type situation. Level 3 is where you're generally going to have more trouble. In answer to your question, because that's a wide range of placement alternatives, from a foster home to our hardware secure facilities. And the level of care includes individual, family, group counseling, medication management, a lot of behavioral modification components to that. And so when we have difficulty, it's probably in that level 3, but we also have a different level 3, which is for the JJ kids, because what I just said is DNN, but you have a juvenile justice enhanced level 3 developed just for them, usually have an extensive delinquent history and other factors, maybe drug and alcohol use, chronic runaway behavior. Both of the level 3s provide the same level of mental health treatment and counseling, but have different settings, because you'll have the JJ in a more restrictive setting. So I have sat in my office till 11 o'clock with our deputy commissioner over child programs and her executive director, literally making calls to find a placement. Calling every single one of our providers, and it's always going to be in this higher level of service, harder to place youth. We find the placements, but your question was how frequently does it happen? And it's something that is worked on every single day, and it's a challenge. I mean, but we managed to get it done. And there's also level 4, which is even greater. And so when you get to those levels, sometimes it's hard.
Madam Chair. Thank you. Related to the provider rate increase and allowing the department to be competitive in rates, how do Tennessee rates compare to other states?
I'm going to say a couple of comments, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Al-Casey to take it over, because he has done a whole lot of work. What I will say is that this provider rate increase that we've asked for equates to just a 3.27% increase. And the reason why we need it now is the kids coming into custody are requiring higher levels of service. They are staying longer. And with the implementation of Family First, all of those together will cause us to, I think, have a hard time with our providers. You know, under Families First, this rate increase is tied to what we call QRTP, a Qualified Residential Treatment Program. And it puts on our providers additional requirements that they've never had to do, such as having access 24/7 to nurses, therapists, promising a 6-month after care once a child is released. And if they don't maintain this QRTP status, then we aren't able to draw down the federal funds. So, and yet they were required to do all this with no rate increase. And so it's pretty important at this particular time that we ask for it and hopefully get it for them. But I'm going to ask Dr. Al-Casey to answer your question about what we looked at.
Okay, so we did the study and we looked at other states and insurance companies to compare the current rate that we pay our providers compared to the other rates. So we looked at several ones. For example, I'll just give a few examples. For example, we looked at the level 3 continuum special needs. This is extensive treatment requirement for kids, and we found that our rate is $216 compared to other state, Ohio and Texas range between $110 to $285. So we are in the lower end of the rates. And we also found that in other levels, level 3 continuum special need enhanced, we paying $324. It goes all the way up with Ohio paying $477. The rate structure in Tennessee is not always similar to other states. So we were really trying to read and understand what the other states pay for so that we can make a comparison to Tennessee. But in general, we find our biggest problem is the insurance companies. They are paying much more than the rate of the state. And when you have insurance company paying much higher rates, if a child come to the provider from insurance company, they would rather take that child, of course, but because we have a good relationship with our providers, it doesn't always happen that way. But our effort is to try to make those rates very comparable as much as we can. And that's why we asked for the rate increase.
So some of our providers, you know, I'm give an example. They may have 60 beds. They may have promised DCS, we'll give you 20. And so we know that we've got 20 beds on any given day there for this level of service. But we all know that every single day kids come into custody. And if we get a child that comes into custody that needs that level of service, we call them and say, I know we've already got 20 there, but will you also allow us to place this child with you? And so that's what we're saying is the 40 other beds, if they can get more money, either by taking kids from out of state or private, you know, kids that are placed there through parents that have insurance, then we lose out. And so if we can get our rates up there to match, we would have a much easier time because we do have good relationships with them. And they work hard and they try and accommodate, but, you know, it's a business.
And last one, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And I think you answered my last question, but my last question was, will it meet the department's need? And from your response, it sounds like it's an ever-growing and ever-changing need. So this is just a temporary meeting of that need, correct? Am I right in my assumption?
I think you're correct because the needs do change and they are growing. One thing that we are hopeful for that with Family First Prevention Service Act that will implement on July the 1st. Across the country, the goal will be to keep kids out of custody. So that could potentially lessen our competition within our state if you have other states that are also trying not to. So we don't know how it's going to play out in the end, but we have to prepare that if it doesn't work this way, we have to have a place for these children.
Well, and just quickly to close, Madam Chair, just Commissioner, truly thank you to you and your team. You were always extremely responsible. You've personally helped me with a couple of issues in my district. So thank you to you and your team for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Next on the list, Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for I'm over here.
No, I was looking, I was like, I was like, okay, I hear a voice.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. I appreciate it. And wanted to just, as a practicing lawyer, I've had many conversations with a lot of your lawyers that work for DCS and the amount of work that they do for our kids across the state. The caseloads they have is just phenomenal. So there's so many and they do such a great job. So I wanted you to know that, and I appreciate that assistance you provide the families that need lawyers that can't afford them. So I appreciate that. I noticed in your budget you're asking for a 7% salary increase for your lawyers, but that wasn't included in the governor's budget. And you're seeking 2 more attorney positions, which, believe me, you probably need a lot more than that. But my questions are: how does DCS attorney salaries compare to other executives in the executive branch agencies in Tennessee? And then my follow-up question will be, how will not receiving this increase affect your ability to serve the children of Tennessee? If you can provide some insight on those 2, that would be great. Thank you.
Well, I said publicly when we presented the budget to the governor, and I had with me that day the market study that we had done for our lawyers to ask for that. Oh, and look at what just was amazing. So our associate counsel, which is our brand new ones, makes $71,640. The state salary average for that is $76,320. Our senior associate counsel, so those that you would have had contact with that just have a little more experience, their average is $89,400, but the Tennessee state average for that level is $96,000. And then our deputy general counsel and our general counsel as well make a few thousand less than their counterparts. You're right, they do maintain a high caseload, both custodial children and non-custodial. We have lost a bunch of lawyers and probably will continue to, and it's like anything else. If you come in and you learn and you train, and then you leave for more money, it places a hardship on the department. That said, I'm supportive of the governor's budget. We will continue to fill those spots and hope that they stay with us with the funds that we have. And, people have to make choices for their families and their own bills that they have. And so I suspect we will continue on the path that we're on.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. In your reductions, budget reductions, you have a regional support grant reduction of $150,000. My understanding is that that's for prevention-based services here in Davidson County and Shelby County. Can you confirm what those grants are and tell me a little bit about what services will be cut with the reduction of those grants?
Yes, sir. I'm trying to flip over to which slide it is. All right, one of them was, do you want to know who the contract with who the grant went to? You want the specifics?
Please.
Okay, so one of them went to Cathedral of Faith Community Church, and that was a reduction. It was reduced from $75,000 to $50,000. One of them, and that was just sort of a community partnership collaboration. One of them was Community Alliance for the Homeless, and it was rent support for homeless families. And that was a $75,000 reduction, which is the equivalent to a 50%. And we talked, these are people that we have had great relationships with and still do, still support them. The third was the Martha O'Brien Center. It's a parent training and like a Teen Connect program. And we reduced that contract by $50,000, which was also a 50% reduction. And what it did is reduce the number of families that are served in that contract. And in making reductions, y'all saw our pie chart. The children that are in our custody and the services that we have to and want to provide for them. I mean, you don't touch it. I mean, we have to have the beds. We have to have the services. So you started looking at where we could make other cuts. And this particular area was a place that we found some. So, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Commissioner, thank you again. And just to echo Chairman Zachary, we all really deeply appreciate the work that you do. And as a former prosecutor, I know that you bring a very unique perspective to this position. You fought hard in the court system for children in your district and to bring justice to a lot of the crimes that occurred against them. And now you're doing that statewide. And so thank you for that. I want to talk a little bit about the Families First Prevention Services Act. I know that we invested $15 million in state funds in that because the programs that we were using, we knew they worked, but the federal government wanted us to be able to prove that from an evidence-based programming standpoint that they were up to the standard that would meet that federal requirement. So where are we on that? I know you mentioned a while ago on full implementation of that. Really kind of where are we on that? And is there a way to be able to recoup that $15 million that we invested in state dollars?
So the Family First Prevention Service Act requires every state to submit a 5-year prevention plan. We will be submitting ours end of the month or April. In that plan, we selected 5 programs that have been cleared by the feds and put in this clearinghouse. And the 5 programs are, as you said, evidence-based. And we chose those 5 based on looking at the current needs of our families and our children, sort of with a standardized assessment, and looking at which of the evidence-based programs exist within the state and the location of where we need the services. So the 5 that we chose were motivational interviewing, MST or multi-systemic therapy, parent-child interaction therapy, home builders, and Youth Villages program called Intercept. 4 of the 5 of those programs are that highest level, according to the feds, being well supported. One of them, Intercept, which is a newer one, is supported. So it's also in the clearinghouse, but just one notch down, according to them, one notch down. We are meeting with our providers monthly for both. There's a prevention working group and there is a congregate care working group. The prevention being these services that were offered. The congregate care, when I talked about QRTPs, on all the things that our providers are going to have to do for us to continue to draw down federal dollars. And we are, in answer to your question, we are in a good place. We feel very confident about our plan. We took a very deliberate, thoughtful approach. We formed a team, or I formed a team. One member is here if we have additional or a lot of questions. That is, I think, the best around, and they are working near constantly to keep us in this place that we are. We've also had town hall style kind of meetings with every interested provider. I believe in terms of recouping the funds, once we pull the trigger on it, then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. O'Casey, because that's where the funds where we'll start being able to draw down additional federal.
So to answer your question, the stream of funds that's going to come to the department basically come from programs that were state funded. For example, the Intercept and MST, those are programs that already exist. They're state funded. Now, July 1st, we will be able to recoup 50% of the fund. So we almost can increase the slots that's available to serve kids just as a result of the Families First. In addition to that, also in our case management, also we have a portion of the case management that prior to the Families First, we would require what we call penetration rate, meaning reduce the amount that we bill the feds. Now, this requirement will no longer be a requirement. So we will be able actually to go from almost 50% to 100% on that piece. So there's a lot of places that the department and the state is going to benefit from Families First.
And I want to add one thing in our budget that we're asking for $100,000 is for home builders. One of the Families First programs, or one of the evidence-based, well-supported programs that we're seeking funding for. I just want to point out that the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services currently operates a similar program called TIES. You probably have heard of that, TIES, which stands for Therapeutic Intervention Education and Skills. They currently have 7 in-home therapists, and this funding, if we get it, the $100,000 will allow them to transition, because they're willing to transition to home builders because they can still do what they do and start serving this population. And I think it's always, it's just a smart thing. If we've got a state department that's already got it and they're willing to transition to serving this population, and the $100,000 would allow us to increase the number of children and families they serve.
Thank you, Commissioner and Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know our time is running down, and you can probably send me the answer to this. When we passed the Juvenile Justice Reform Act, there was a lot of programs that was going into place that was going to result into savings for the department. And so I'm just wondering about those savings, and did that money come back into the juvenile justice portion of DCS? But you can get the answer back to me later. I know we have to go.
And we'll be glad to pull the numbers for you. And one of the things that I think the savings were anticipated to come from is because the youth that were in custody there was a cap on how long they could stay there without the judges looking at it and making a new sort of determination. But we'll be glad to pull those numbers for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I really would appreciate to know if the savings went back into the juvenile justice portion of the department,
Okay.
or were they just kind of in the general fund of the
Okay.
department? So when you
Yes, ma'am.
respond, I'd appreciate it. You can just get it to the chairman. She'll get it to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We do have, as Leader Camper alluded to, we have a time limit because we need to do some sanitation before our next group, but we have several questions on our original list, and then perhaps others as well. So what I would ask, Leader Camper, if you wouldn't mind just articulating that question, get it to my office. We will put it with a list of others and send it to Commissioner Nichols and ask them to respond, and we'll share that with the entire group. Just want to add my thanks to others that have been expressed here today for the work that you all do. I personally have a friend who has some grandchildren who, because of a unfortunate situation, have gone through DCS, and they have a permanent placement now, which is incredibly just a huge relief for them as grandparents. And I think just will make a remarkable difference in those children's lives. So, and I know those stories play out across the state every day. And we thank you for the work, the hard work that everybody in your department and all of the, I think we need to remember too, we're not in this alone as a state. We have a lot of other partners, local governments and the judicial system and other not-for-profits and so forth who are working in this space as well. So, but you're the guys that we look to kind of be the tip of that spear. So thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for joining us here today.
Thank
We'll get a list of those additional questions to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We are going to take just a minute for our cleaning folks to have an opportunity to make sure that we're being safe. And then we will be hearing from the Department of Human Services. Commissioner Carter and his team will be up next. Thank you. Commissioner Carter, whenever you're ready, we'll be ready for you to begin. Commissioner, thank you for joining us here this morning. And oh man, your department is relying on you to handle it by yourself. Nobody else with you at the table.
To my rescue. Oops.
Well, good to know that you have backup, but we'll, yeah.
Absolutely, and they will rush to my rescue at an instant. Okay.
Right, we are, again, on our budget hearings, now Human Services, and we'll ask Commissioner Carter to give us an overview of your budget requests, both the things included and the things asked for and not given.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. This is day 41, and my first time before this committee, so I would ask you to be gentle. So,
we'll try, but no promises.
Okay. the things that we would like to share with you in our budget presentation this morning is if you would run a little bit backwards and then come forward. We want to start with just a brief discussion about the year that was and talk to you about our tornado response and our COVID response, and then moving into the here and now, talking about the TANF Opportunity Act and some other relevant budget issues. So if we could, we'll dive right in. As I said, this past year is the year that was, and it began with a double whammy of a challenge in that first, we were hit with a horrific tornado that literally destroyed, completely leveled one of our offices here. And you can see on the screenshot there, that's the devastation, the aftermath of the tornado. The upside of that is that our staff was able to instantly pivot to provide the vital services of human services through other venues in the midst of that horrific tornado. And then literally 2 weeks later, COVID hit. And we were required to not only lift up our Davidson County office, but the rest of the state, in order to be able to provide the vital life-sustaining services of DHS all across Tennessee, in our 95 counties. And there were several programs that we had to literally stand up on the fly, and you will see them listed on the slide here. But so in addition to the day-to-day administration of the regular DHS program portfolio, there were several of these that had to be stood up and administered in the midst of the pandemic. And I am pleased to report that the leadership and staff of the Department of Human Services reacted and served Tennesseans in vulnerable circumstances with distinction. And so you can be proud of the work that DHS did in the midst of the pandemic. And this here just lists some of the direct responses that we were required to administer in the midst of the pandemic. And as I said, I think that you can be very, very proud of the work that DHS has done in that regard. And as we begin to see the clouds lifting, know that we will continue to provide the highest quality, most efficient and effective human services that are possible to serve with what we have learned from the pandemic. I think if DHS is representative of Tennessee state government, you can be so very proud of the fact that this government pivoted in the midst of the health and economic crisis to continue to provide high quality services to the citizens of Tennessee. And you have my promise that we will continue to operate with distinction under my leadership. So if we can move forward to the here and now and our TANF Opportunity Act. With members of this body, particularly Representative Hawk, on the contours of how we are looking to use TANF to serve families moving forward. And I want to share just a bit of that with you, okay? In our view, the TANF program and the safety net writ large, it ought to be about lifting as many Tennesseans as possible beyond the need for these services, okay? It should not be our objective to warehouse poverty, disenfranchisement, and dysfunction. It ought to be our objective to lift as many beyond it as possible. And so we see the opportunity, the TANF Opportunity Fund, to be able to do just that, to provide a pathway to prosperity pilot and also an allotment increase. Those are sort of the cornerstones of this initiative. And then we're also going to talk about the TANF reserve investment, the Tennessee Opportunity Pilot Program, our community grants, the TANF Advisory Board, and the $191 million rainy day fund. And also a discussion about our unspent annual TANF award, which I know has been the source of much consternation. And we believe that we have a plan to bring that all into focus and rally to use those dollars in the best interest of Tennesseans in vulnerable circumstances. And also in the bill are two important program integrity protections: increased civil penalties for bad actors and confidential reporting of fraud, waste, and abuse. So we see this act as a balance between service and integrity, that we have an obligation to ensure that every dollar we expend is expended for the intended purpose. And that intended purpose is to grow the capacity to reduce the dependency of Tennesseans in vulnerable circumstances. So let's dive into our budget overview. Okay. And I wanted to do just a little bit of a DHS budget tutorial before we sort of dive into the particulars. In the aggregate, you will see in this slide that DHS is a $2.5 billion agency, which is made up primarily of federal funding sources. You will see in our pie chart a very small carve out for other revenue sources. And those other revenue sources are state funding, which supports the being able to draw down the lion's share of DHS of DHS revenue. So we are a primarily federally funded organization with state support to draw down those federal funds. And you will notice, if you back up, you will notice there are match and maintenance of effort, and that is what Tennessee is required to expend to draw down its $191 million TANF grant. Okay, and we primarily spend those dollars through the Department of Education programs in order to meet the match requirement to receive our TANF funding. So that's a little bit about how our budget operates. Okay, cost increases, and so a $900,000 spending authority increase specifically for disability claims examiners positions. We have had a backlog in disability determinations, and that has been due to significant reductions in our disability claims examiners. Now, this is 100% funded by the federal government. And so this $900,000 increase will allow us to add the additional disability claims examiners that will allow us to address any backlog in disability claims. Okay? And so you will see in reductions in the 12% reductions that were proposed in the 20 budget, $1 million of that 12% was produced by reducing by $1 million that TANF maintenance of effort. And we have been able to, through attrition, reduce just under $700,000 in longevity compensation. And then by right sizing our appeals and hearings administration, we also were able to reduce another $462,000 there. Those are our cost increases and reductions in DHS. So what I want to do here is I want to explain a little bit about how our TANF budget process works. So I want to begin with showing you that every year for now 25 years, Tennessee has received $191 million in a TANF block grant. Okay, TANF is entering its 25th year, and the appropriation that was set for TANF of $16 billion has been unchanged in 25 years, and so Tennessee has received every year for the 25 years is $191 million. You will see in the next part of our chart here is our annual estimated expenditures of the $191 million. Okay, and again in our pie chart, the majority of our expenditures are on TANF benefits. Now, with the TANF Opportunity Act, we would increase that annual expenditure by $24 million. And you can see in the yellow or beige shaded part of the pie graph are other TANF expenses, and you can chalk those up essentially to the administration of the program. Okay. And then finally, our child support reentry is that very small sliver. The next section of our expenditures are a couple of options that are available to the agency. The TANF statute allows for a transfer of up to 30% of that 191 million. It allows it to be transferred to the Child Care and Development Fund for specific expenditures under the guidelines of CCDF for child care. Okay. We also are allowed to spend up to another $41 million directly of TANF funding on child care. Now, I would tell you in this past year or so, with the challenges of COVID, we have spent much more in the child care space than we have historically. And so I cannot tell you whether or not these expenditures will continue as they have for the past year. My suspicion, again, with the COVID cloud lifting, those expenditures will adjust some. But I just wanted to show you here what is the outside possibility of childcare spending in TANF. That's what you see here. And then finally, what you see here is the impact on the reserve. If we were to expend $98 million, which you see in our optional, it would actually take us $30 million above that $191 million if all other annual estimates were constant. But all of those estimates, please know, they are to the higher side. So there is a possibility where you see $52 million in TANF benefits and another $24 million with the increase that we might not reach that level. Okay, and so again, this is all based on sort of annual estimates. And then if we were to underspend this optional, there could be as much as almost $30 million that again would be reserved as unexpended. So I just wanted to share with you how this TANF funding works. And now I want to talk about the reserve itself and what it looks like and what we intend to do with it. So I want to begin by explaining and using some terms that kind of get thrown around a bunch. I will use the term unobligated balance. The unobligated balance is the portion of the TANF block grant that has yet to be drawn down from the Federal Reserve. As I said, every year for 25 years, Tennessee has received $191 million. And there is not a requirement that every one of those dollars is expended in the year that it is appropriated, and the federal government simply holds those dollars in reserve until the state requests them. Okay, and so we report on a quarterly basis an unobligated balance, In our last report, that unobligated balance was $710 million. Now, I want to further explain that this unobligated is what has not been drawn down from the federal treasury. But it doesn't mean that Tennessee doesn't have intentions for those dollars. And this is where this starts to shift. And so we want to share with you how that shifts. So we are proposing in the TANF Opportunity Act that we have annually $191 million rainy day fund. And this is, again, on the chance that we experience something like we have experienced this year and our caseloads go up. So we do want to hold $191 million in reserve. That would take $191 million off of that 710. So again, not obligated, not drawn down from the federal government, but not unobligated. You will also see our Department of Education summer grant funding, in which the Department of Education administers these summer camps, and $82 million will be expended from TANF over the next 3 years for that obligation. So again, that comes off the top of $710 million. And then we have in 95 counties in Tennessee, community operations for our 2-generation initiative, which focuses on education, health and well-being for our TANF eligible families, as I said, in 95 counties. And we have contracted over the course of the next 5 years, $205 million to all of those, the grantees across the state of Tennessee. So what you will see by the connector there is that $480 million of what is considered unobligated, not drawn down from the federal treasury, okay, Tennessee has obligations against. And so, and those obligations are future obligations, all right? And so if you'll see on the yearly allocation chart how those future allocations break down. The 2-generation spending goes out over 5 years, and it is our total contracted amount. Now, folks, it's important, when I say total contracted amount, that is what we have reserved in contract agreements with our 95 2-gen partners all across the state of Tennessee. It does not mean that those grantees will necessarily expend that $205 million. They will expend as their operation has them expend.
Commissioner,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you there, but we asked for a 10-minute
Whoopsie.
time limit, and we've sort of blown past that.
Whoopsie.
I know that we will come back. I'm sure that there are going to be questions about
Yes,
the
ma'am.
TANF funding, so
Okay.
we'll try to address those with our questions. And we'll begin those with Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Commissioners, over here. There you go. How you doing, sir? Thank you, Commissioner Carter, for being with us this morning. My first question, and there will be several follow-ups to this. The department has requested just over $900,000 of federal funding for 11 new positions to determine disability claims and address the statewide backlog that we have. I'd like to know, how large is this backlog that we have, and how long has there been a backlog, sir?
So, there has been a backlog for several years, Mr. Chairman. But again, the disability determination, this is funding and an operation which is 100% funded by the federal government. So we don't have hiring authority until the feds say you can, and then provide the dollars too. And I shared with you earlier in this presentation that this $900,000, it will allow us to hire these new disability determination examiners to allow us to completely wipe out the backlog.
And how large is that backlog, sir?
I do not have that information in front of me, but we are
If you
happy
could,
to.
if you would just state your name for the record and your title, please.
Sorry, Chairman. Whitney Page, Chief of Staff for the Department of Human Services. I don't have the current Oh, here we go. Currently, DDS has around 12,000 claims that are unassigned. And as of October of 2020, Disability Determination Services has about 38,000 pending active cases.
I see. And is the shortage of personnel the reason for this backlog?
The shortage of the personnel is directly attributable to the backlog. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And Commissioner, if you get the 11 positions, do you think y'all will be able to attack this backlog and reduce it in a certain amount of time?
I do believe we will be expeditiously able to reduce this backlog.
Okay. And sir, once we get this backlog, do you think you'll still need those 11 positions?
I think in order to continue to be current, yes, those 11 positions I think will be essential.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you. Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Carter, thank you so much.
How are you, sir?
As you referenced my name earlier, we have been in deep discussions 7 days a week for about 6 weeks now. So I really appreciate where we've been and where we're going with the TANF funding. And I'm not going to go down that road, but I do want to say thank you to yourself, Governor Lee, Speaker Sexton, Chairman Terry, Chairman Watson, and our whole TANF working group that have worked through this and come up with some of the spending plan, the investment plan that we're working on. And again, it's critical for this committee to understand that we are looking to lift recipients beyond the need to be on the TANF program.
That's correct.
And I'll say that as many times as I can. So thank you so much. In the chair lady's infinite wisdom, she chose not to allow me to ask a question on TANF because she knew I'd be here all day. I do want to ask about a recent program that our YMCAs and our Boys and Girls Clubs have seen success in, the Child Care Essential Worker Program. You came before us a few weeks ago with a budget expansion request. How's that going? I know we're looking at a March 31st potential stop. Where are we with that program right there, Commissioner?
So again, the Essential Worker Program, it was a result of the pandemic, and the basis of it is for those individuals that absolutely had to work. We wanted to make sure that we were able to provide childcare for them. Now we have been in discussions about when it is appropriate to be able to cease this which was created by the pandemic. Okay. And so those discussions are currently ongoing. I believe at this point there will be some slight extension as to a non-determinate date for when we will cease to provide the essential worker child care. But it has been something that has been essential for Tennessee workers during this time.
Madam Chair, if I could follow up, and thank you so much. And I visit my local YMCA, my local boys and girls clubs every week when I'm in, and it's been a great success there. I will make a request of Ms. Page as well as Ms. Carr in the audience that we can back to TANF very quickly. We've got some amendatory language we're working on. We're looking to put on full committee. If you could get me a copy of that amendatory language that we're looking at for the TANF legislation, it may still be in works, but if you could get that, I'd appreciate that.
Sure thing. It is actually with the Office of Legal Services with drafting right now. We checked in on it over the weekend, and we will provide you what we have and then provide you any updates.
Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair Lady.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Commissioner. It's good to have you and your staff here. My question is going to be pertaining to the child care development funds. So prior to, I guess, around 2019, I think about $20 million was being referred or was being unspent. So now all this federal monies that we know that are coming down. So what's that going to look like with are we going to be able to use that effectively? I guess is my first question. Then I've got a couple of follow-ups after that.
So, Mr. Chairman, what we have been discussing in amongst our team is using the opportunity of this massive additional influx of childcare funding to address system capacity. One of the things that we have found is that there literally is not enough childcare capacity in Tennessee, particularly in more rural areas. And so what we want to do is to focus more intently on trying to build that capacity so it's available long term, as opposed to just providing more subsidy, which quite frankly would increase the entitlement, as opposed to addressing this vital issue of capacity, which is all across the state.
So let's stick with that just for a second,
Mhm.
talking about capacity.
Yes, sir.
So what is it looking like at this point? Are some of the facilities that shut down during COVID, are they coming back? So
So-
what is that looking like?
So we are back to about 80% of pre-COVID capacity. We lost half of our capacity during the height of the pandemic. More than 50% of all childcare facilities shut down during the pandemic, and we are now back to about 80% of pre-COVID capacity.
So what can and what, I guess, what is the department doing to make, I guess, to bring awareness to that there are capacity issues, and what are you doing to, try to help these facilities to get back online or bring new ones online? So what does DHS do to help that?
So one of the things that we are doing is through our training and development, we are trying to help it be not so difficult to stand up and operate a childcare facility. Okay. And, one of the issues attendant to that is the rules around the operation of childcare. While we want to make sure that every childcare facility is safe, healthy, and developmentally appropriate, we don't want to make the noose so constricting that it's difficult to operate the business. And so we are trying to work with our provider community to, one, identify the need, and two, help those that could operate childcare facilities to be able to do that with the least restrictions possible.
Thank you, Commissioner. And representing a rural community, I can tell you that is really a struggle trying to find that child care. So I say kudos, and I encourage you to keep on doing the good work and fighting the fight. We certainly need that out, and not only across the state of Tennessee, but certainly in those rural communities. Thank you again
Yes,
for
sir.
being here this morning. Thank you, Chair Lady.
And I'll just make a pitch. There's a wonderful piece of legislation out there regarding a child care task force. I know it's absolutely wonderful because I'm the sponsor. It has a fiscal note on it for about $83,000 for potentially a study. Again, I think we all recognize that child care, it was an issue before the pandemic. It's an even greater issue now, and I think the pandemic has highlighted the particular holes that we have, rural areas being one. And I think with that, in order to solve this problem, we don't have enough money, even with all the dollars that are being drawn down, to do that on an ongoing basis. We need to develop partnerships in the private sector. We need to do a lot of things that I think we can do in a creative and innovative way. And that's the goal of that child care task force. So I'm just making a pitch for a funding letter. We'll talk about that later, Commissioner.
Yes, ma'am. And Madam Chairman, if I could, one of the bright lights that has come out of our COVID haze is an emphasis on our community partners. We have a vast array of very high functioning community partners without which we couldn't do what it is that we do. This is not simply about what the government does, it's about what the whole of Tennessee does. And we have wonderful community partners to help us in that.
And I'll just add to that, I think too, we have a lot of community partners. We have a lot of community organizations and other small groups that aren't really partnering with the state. They're just people out there trying to attack this problem. So again, to be repetitive, I think it's important that we have a really good data set of what the resources are, who's attempting to solve the problem, and then look at how we can bring all of those people together so that we're not duplicating efforts, that we're making sure that we're using everybody's dollars, whether they're taxpayer dollars, private sector dollars, or the dollars that moms and dads are paying for the childcare in the most effective way. So it's a critical issue, it's ongoing, and as our economy has never been that slow here in Tennessee, but as it gears up even more, as we all hope it will, that's going to continue to be an issue because people cannot work if they cannot have a place for their children to be cared for, and not just parked, but childcare that works on development and all of the other things that we would want our own children to have access to. So again, that's an incredibly important issue. And we have beat this horse before, so I won't go there again, with dollars that were unspent that could have been utilized that we did not take advantage of. And I just want to make sure that that does not happen again, and that we have this windfall, and we can spend lots of time discussing whether or not we think that was a good thing or a bad thing, but it is the thing that we're dealing with. So we have these dollars, and I think it is just incumbent upon us. It's our responsibility in this committee and in this legislature as a whole, but it certainly starts with this committee to try and make sure that we use those in ways that are both appropriate and that are going to make the biggest impact on Tennesseans going forward. So next on my list, Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, I would hope that your study on child care, not to keep beating a dead horse, includes salaries for the people that service children in these child care facilities, organizations. So I look forward to seeing your legislation. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. I want to talk about the student meals program, and that during the pandemic, the department expanded the program to ensure that students had access.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you give us an update on these efforts and what the benefits are that the department is providing to the schools?
Sure. Let me back up and run forward. Okay.
That's fine.
Prior to the pandemic, children that were eligible for free and reduced lunch, okay, that was provided, of course, through the school. You go to school, you get the free and reduced meals. Well, of course, the pandemic happens, school shut down, then there isn't the same access to those meals. And in many instances, those meals were an important part of a child's nutrition day. And so what we needed to do is to ensure that that benefit transferred to the home. Thus, the pandemic electronic benefits transfer program. So initially in round one, 700,000 Tennessee children were eligible to receive this benefit. And DHS stood up, again, immediately a program to be able to address that. We were, with our first blush, able to serve about 500,000 of those eligible children. And then over the course of time, get to pretty much the whole eligible universe. There were some hiccups in doing so, but standing up a program like that in the midst of the pandemic it provided a challenge for us.
Thank you for that. So on the PEBT cards, was that a mix of delivery? Was some of it on the cards? Were some of them in person at some of these facilities that stood up to?
The benefit is all on the card for the utilization of the family to get that, to execute the nutrition benefit. So they could, go to the grocery store and use that, or other food serving places.
Do you plan to continue this plan over the summer to help with some of the summer school programs and initiatives that's going on?
We are currently in executing the third round of pandemic electronic benefits transfer. And in order to do that, we have both a school portal for schools to upload the information of the eligible children in the system, and then also for parents to verify that their child is in the system and eligible. And then our vendor will send cards, and it is our intention to, by the 19th, to begin sending cards to every eligible child that is identified through the system. So in partnership with not only our Department of Education, but with superintendents all across the state and parents, we're continuing to deliver PEBT.
And I think I heard you say that initially you didn't, out of maybe the 700,000, you reached about 500,000, but now you've reached all of the children that are eligible.
The mechanism that we have stood up this time, it creates an easy and flexible way for us to reach every eligible child. Now that's in partnership, again, with the schools and parents, but we do have a mechanism to reach every eligible child.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to follow up on that, you're partnering with the schools, but we have a large body of students in this state who are homeschooled. We have charter schools, we have a number of private schools. So how do we reach those children? How do we make sure that they're being covered?
Madam Chair, I'm going to need to dig into that and peel back that onion for you a little bit to get you to get your response.
All right, thank you. I just know that could be a significant number of children that we're not including in this
Absolutely.
700,000 or so.
Mhm.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Commissioner. I was wondering if you could expand on the Tennessee Rehabilitation Vocational Center in Smyrna, my district. Any potential changes out there?
The only changes is that we are beginning to get back to in-person training. Of course, we had gone completely virtual during the height of the pandemic, and that presents a challenge to many of the folks served through Smyrna. And now again, as the clouds begin to clear from the pandemic, we are slowly moving back to the most safe and healthy in-person training possible.
Is Walgreens and still a big partner for y'all?
I do believe it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah. Real quick, if I could, Chairman. I had a young man that came through that program years ago, worked at my business for a while, had a lot of issues, but one thing that was astonishing about him, he could go bowling, Donnie Charles, and he'd bowl a strike after strike after strike. He'd bowl a perfect game, but he had other challenges, but it was just the most amazing thing I ever seen, just to bowl a perfect game, which I've never bowled a perfect game. But I mean, it was just really astonishing. So I appreciate the good work that y'all do in Smyrna.
And Mr. Chairman, I would tell you this, okay? One of the things that I feel like has been a challenge of not only the Tennessee Department of Human Services, but human services writ large, is that we have focused on the vulnerability and the what we think people can't do, okay? What people can do is amazing. And if our emphasis is on how can we help that individual or that family achieve their God-given potential, that's what social services needs to be about. Not just warehousing dysfunction and disability and poverty, but literally understanding the strengths of that individual, that family, and being intentional of helping them grow beyond.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lake. Commissioner, thanks for coming. I just had a couple of questions regarding TANF. Last year, DHS had a reserve balance of a little over $730 million. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about spending this, and there's a number or a floor which you'd like to see us maintain those reserves. However, it looks like in spending, though, we only spend about half what we receive. So even if we were to statutory required, or you were to request us to make sure that you had those monies, we're not spending it. It will be right back to where we are right now if we're only spending half. Could you speak to that and what the purpose of it is, and why you think that we should need this reserve balance so high?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think I was attempting to show you in the presentation. It's not half. It's more than our annual spending is about 124 million of the 190 million. And then the next part of the chart shows you what we have an option to spend in childcare. And then if we were to exercise that full option, we would actually expend more than the $190 million. But again, these are estimates. So we don't see going forward as not expending our full grant, but what will happen from the TANF Opportunity Act is that we will have in place how we spend, what we spend, and manage that unobligated balance, so we keep it in a range of what the annual grant is of the $191 million.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. And I get the where we're talking about this. I guess there were some for instance, under previous speaker, we passed a bill to require a work requirement. There are people that like that. They didn't like that. Either way, all those states that had a work requirement, those were struck down. I guess we had to fund the budget based upon that additional expense. For instance, where does that money go? Or do we see it come back, or how does that work?
Okay, so work is an essential part of the TANF program. It is literally baked into the statute. We are required by law to have 50% of our TANF eligible families in unsubsidized work. The law requires that. Where you may be speaking to is a TennCare or Medicaid work requirement, in which we had to get authority from the federal government for the purpose of requiring work for TennCare recipients. So we asked for that authority, and we have just recently been informed that the likelihood of that waiver being approved is slim to none. And so we had set aside $54 million of TANF funding to support that work requirement. We have now removed that with a proviso that if somehow that waiver were approved, we could then claw back those dollars.
And Commissioner, if I could add on to that as well, I think one of the things, Chairman Williams, you were speaking of earlier is that 191. And if we only spend half, what happens to it? And that's part of what we worked with Representative Hawk on for the TANF Opportunity Act, is that any money that's not expended out of that 191 at the end of the year for the next year, we'll take that and put it into grants programs throughout the state proportional to the amount of poverty in those areas, so that we don't continue to have this issue where it builds up to 700 again. We would just keep the floor at 190, or the ceiling at 191. So 1 year's grants worth, and then anything else would roll over into those programs every year.
If you could go back to the slide with the circles on it just prior to that.
Yes, ma'am.
The third circle over, I believe that you said the yellow or orange or whatever that color is, portion of that 98 million was administration of the program.
No, not in the third one. That is, you are allowed to, in TANF, to spend a portion of the TANF block grant directly on childcare. There's a
Right.
statutory portion that you can transfer to the Child Care and Development Fund, but then there's also a portion that the department could spend directly on childcare. And the difference is what you transfer to the Child Care and Development Fund, that takes on the rules and the texture of the Child Care and Development Fund. When you spend directly on childcare, it retains its TANF texture. So that's not administration. No, that's direct spend as opposed to through the Child Care and Development Fund block grant.
Okay, and just give me examples of both of those, direct spending and then dollars expended through the development fund.
So the Child Care and Development block grant, it organizes spending for both capacity and subsidy. So we can either within CCDF, you can provide a direct subsidy to eligible families, but you have to spend, I think it's 6% that you have to spend in quality to ensure that the quality of the child care that's operated is as high as possible. So that's what the contours of the Child Care and Development Fund are. In direct expenditure from TANF, we can do that just in subsidy. We could do all of that in subsidy to eligible TANF families.
Okay, maybe I understand. Maybe we need to have a conversation
Yes, ma'am.
offline.
Okay.
At any rate, are there other questions? Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Chair Lady. And I could, just to reiterate, this is an extremely complex situation, and I want to thank Chairman Williams and all those folks who have delved into this discussion today, and will continue to delve into this discussion. This is an issue that's going to be ongoing. We've got us what we feel like is a solution, once again, to better invest these funds into strengthening families, and we will certainly get there. But this is an extremely complex issue that I'll invite the chair lady to come sit in one of our Sunday afternoon meetings, and you can be completely debriefed. Or better yet, we'll follow you to wherever you are on Sunday, and we'll have a little sun time. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And all levity aside, it is a complex issue, and I know that there's been lots of discussion. I have not been a part of that committee, and perhaps based on Chairman Hawk's comments, I can be grateful for that.
That's right.
But it does put us at a disadvantage, those of us who haven't delved down into the weeds, when we're looking at these huge numbers and trying to understand again what we need to do to make sure that the dollars are used well. And there are other questions about how these dollars will coordinate. For instance, the Department of Education is getting a huge influx of money. Most of it's going directly to the local education, to the LEAs, but there are dollars in there for learning loss, to address learning loss, that will be utilized for summer programs. So that is that in addition to, how does that relate to this block on your chart that shows the summer programming for DOE, summer camps? Are these dollars inclusive of those, or is there another big pot of money stacked on top of that?
There is, Madam Chair, this is the current obligations that we have against that TANF unobligated balance. And what it was our hope to do by doing this is to share this framework with you and know that we will adjust based on events on the ground in this framework all the time. So you will be able to have a running view of what the top line number is and all of the adjustments against it. So that was the whole purpose of this exercise. It was my feeling that nobody had all of this in front of them. Okay, that we all knew bits and pieces of stuff, but we really needed to get it all together so we were all operating on the same song sheet. And that's what we have here. So you will see adjustments in this format as we move along. And to your earlier comments. The saying is that there are two things that should not be viewed, and that's the making of law and sausage. Okay. And this has been law and sausage making at its finest. But the truth is that I believe that the outcome is a very tasty dish. I think that everybody's worked together to get us to a much better place.
So noted, and we certainly hope that you're right. I would say that I appreciate the fact that we'll have ongoing information, because there's a doubt in my mind if we can actually spend the amount of money that we're going to be getting for some of these buckets in a reasonable way. So again, whether we spend all of the $82.7 million that's in the TANF reserve, in addition to the dollars that the Department of Education will have to address very similar, if not the same issues, I think that'll be subject for ongoing and further discussion.
And Madam Chair, I would just say that we are not in any way, shape, or form spendthrifts, but there are smart and impactful ways to put these dollars in play. And that is what we intend to do. I don't relish the idea of sending dollars back to the federal treasury when there continues to be need. But we are not going to spend in a harried way. It's going to be very strategic and impactful.
And I think that's what this committee would request and ask for.
Yes, ma'am.
With that, I see no further questions. So thank you all for joining us here today. And we will hear from our next group, which is the Department of Revenue, beginning at 11:30. So let the record show we have a 5-minute break.
That's it. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Commissioner, we would invite you to come forward. And welcome this morning. And I think we'll just ask you to get underway, and after your presentation, we'll have a few questions, I'm quite sure. So thank you.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, thank you very much, members of the committee. As always, we appreciate the opportunity to appear before your committee. We're happy to be here today to present our proposed budget for FY22. I'm David Giorgano, Commissioner of Revenue. On my right is Amanda McGraw, our Chief Financial Officer. On my immediate left is Christine Lapps, our Deputy Commissioner. And on my far left is Justin Moorhead, our Chief of Staff. And Chair Lady Hazelwood, I thought we would spend about 5 minutes touching on sort of the pandemic and how it's impacted the department and how we've responded to that to serve our customers. And then maybe another 5 minutes or so talking about our requested budget. I think our budget's a pretty straightforward request. Don't think it'll take a great deal of time. Turning to the first slide, in response to COVID-19, we focused really on 3 areas to support taxpayers. Continuity of service, providing administrative relief, and administering 2 business relief programs funded by the CARES Act. And turning first to continuity of service, like so many organizations, beginning last March, we needed to have employees move and work from home in order to protect their health and slow the spread of the virus. With the help of STS, we were able to make that transition in about 2 weeks' time. And I think it's important to note we never shut down any of our operations in any of our divisions. One of the biggest unknowns was moving our fairly substantial call center operations from being 100% in the office to 100% remote. But again, with wonderful help from STS, frankly, we were able to do that without missing a day of service. And there's this slide includes a couple of metrics that sort of highlight how we've maintained service during the period. Our call answer rate has stayed at 97% or above throughout the period. We actually answered more than 476,000 calls, which was an 11% increase over last year with, like I said, a call answer rate of 97%. Our help desk satisfaction rate, and that's where somebody goes to our help desk, opens a ticket, and communicates, in essence, by email through that ticket with a customer service representative if they choose to do that rather than calling in. We have a feature there where once the ticket's closed, they can give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down on their satisfaction with that ticket. And we've maintained a 95% thumbs up satisfaction rate on our help desk. I just want to briefly credit a couple of things for that customer service, and first and foremost, our outstanding state employees who did a terrific job with the transition. And secondly, having modern systems. This committee has invested in system replacements, both for tax administration and motor vehicle title and registration. And I think those investments certainly paid off when this emergency hit. In terms of administrative relief, we're really talking in the March through July time period. First thing we did, as you know, with your support, is to extend due dates for those big annual filings. Franchise and excise tax, hall income tax, business tax were all moved from April to the middle of July. Professional privilege tax was also moved from June to July. We worked with our partners, the county clerks, to extend motor vehicle registrations that were due in March, April, May, and June out until July. We also took certain actions in our audit and collections activities. We suspended the initiation of new field audits in the state for that period of time, and we worked with taxpayers on how to handle audits that were already ongoing before the pandemic hit. There was some taxpayers may have preferred to push the conclusion of that audit out a little bit. Others may have preferred to get it closed out, avoid any potential additional interest. And we worked with taxpayers on a case-by-case basis to try to accommodate them in the best possible manner. In terms of collections, debt collections, we suspended any new liens of less than $10,000. We suspended levies during this time and made greater use of payment plans, and in particular with low periodic payment amounts during this period. And then turning to the relief programs, as this committee well knows, we've been able to administer 2 complementary programs that were created and overseen by the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group and administered by the Department of Revenue. First being the Tennessee Business Relief Program, under which we distributed $200 million to 28,000 businesses in Tennessee. About 70% of the recipients of those amounts were businesses with gross sales of under $500,000. The maximum size a business could be and receive and be eligible for the program was $10 million, but the larger percentage were the smaller businesses. This was a program that did not require an application. Instead, we used tax data that we have in our system to identify specific industries that qualified, and these were essentially industries that were required to suspend or significantly alter their operations by executive order, or otherwise showed significant loss of business. And we concluded that program around October. And that's when we shifted to the second program, which is currently ongoing, the Supplemental Employer Relief Grant Program. And this program is different in that it's open to all businesses, regardless of industry, as long as the business has less than $10 million in gross sales. But because it's open to everyone, it covers a broader range of businesses. It's an application-based program. And to date, the state has approved for payment just over $47 million to about 2,200 businesses, and that program is currently funded at a level of $125 million and is ongoing. And with that, Madam Chair, I would turn to our proposed budget. We have no cost increase requests for FY22. We do have a number of proposed budget reductions that should have little or no impact on services. In fact, the first item on the list is the only one that will really be visible to the public at all, and that is the transition from an envelope with stuffed inserts to a postcard for motor vehicle renewal notices. That will save about $500,000 a year. The second item on the list is reduced STS support costs, $3 million. This is in essence the cost of maintaining the old mainframe before we switch to the new system, which of course is server-based. So the support that STS gave us in supporting that mainframe is no longer needed. So these are some of the cost savings that follow the transition to the new service. The new system. The third category, reduced operational expenditures of $1.6 million, sort of falls into that category as well. That's primarily third-party contracts that are no longer needed. A little over $200,000 in reduced travel reflects, I think, what we anticipate to be the ongoing impact of change in the way we interact remotely with taxpayers. Not that we won't be visiting taxpayers any longer, but I think we've learned new ways that we can do that and travel somewhat less. $750,000 is saved by terminating our Metro Center lease. For the first time in Davidson County, the Department of Revenue employees are all in one building, in the Andrew Jackson building together, which we are very happy to all be in one central location. This is also a result of of more AWS, alternative workspace solution. And then $1.5 million finally is the recognition of growth in current services revenue, which will reduce our state appropriation. So it's a total savings of just over $7.5 million. Next slide is just a quick snapshot of our positions. We have 873 total positions in our FY22 budget request. We did reduce 58 vacancies in FY21, and the pie chart simply breaks those down by division. So in conclusion, we have a base budget of $94.8 million, have $7.5 million in cost reductions for a total requested state appropriation of $87.3 million. Combined with $34.9 million in current services revenue for a total budget request of $122.2 million, Madam Chair Lady. And that concludes my prepared remarks. I would be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you for a very succinct report. We appreciate that. Chairman Williams, I believe you're first on the list.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. I had a question. Last year, the legislature set aside some TEMA money for tornado relief. But I also know that we carry in the budget some disaster relief monies. That balance, I think, is in excess of about $3.6 million. My understanding of that monies is that if somebody from my district wanted to get tax relief on a refrigerator, they could submit the form to the department. Department would reimburse sales tax for those. I guess the question is that process is very cumbersome. We don't have a lot of people really that take that in consideration. But I also know that many of our communities over the last year, from Hamilton, Wilson, McMinn, Putnam, and others, there were 2 rounds of tornadoes that struck. I guess my question is could those monies be used is there a statutory authority to be able those monies to be used for loss of property tax revenues for those communities that were struck by tornadoes, or is that not a possibility?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So statutorily, that's not. It's very specific how that relief program works. The one that the department administers for sales tax reimbursement. It has its history in the 2010 floods. It was originally sort of temporary, and then it was made permanent. It is funded at a certain level every year. Requires a disaster declaration, and it requires that the homeowner receive federal assistance. That triggers eligibility for the sales tax refund. And as you correctly mentioned, it's for appliances, furniture, building materials for repair, and that sort of thing. But it's all specific in the statute, and that particular program is specifically sales tax. So I think it would need some other alternative legislation to go into other areas.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I guess the reason, what happens to that money if people don't take advantage of it over a period of time? I mean, if it grew to $10 million, does the money sit there and revert every year until the next disaster, I suppose?
Yeah, if it's all right, I'm going to defer to Amanda, our CFO, to speak to that specifically.
Good morning. That money is actually in a reserve.
If you could turn on your mic, and also if you could just say your name and title for the record, please.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. My name is Amanda McGraw. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Revenue. The money specifically that you're speaking about actually sits in a reserve there in Revenue. So we carry that forward and do the paperwork to keep that money in that reserve so that it does not revert.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. In question 2 of the questionnaire you provided us, You stated that you received approximately $378 million from CARES Act funding for small business relief. And I see as of November 30th, you've spent $206 million of it. Do you expect to spend the rest of the balance before the deadline at the end of this year?
So I think, yes, and that number will be made up, $200 million from the original business relief program, and then for SURGE, Supplemental Employer Relief Grant, the approved amounts up about 48 million. So just to give you an updated amount, so 248. You know, we are still working those applications and working, putting a lot of focus on those to get that amount out. I don't know that we have a definitive answer on whether the entire 125 million that's currently allocated to SURGE will ultimately be claimed by applicants who, you know, who do support the full claim. So I don't have a definitive answer. I don't want to throw something out there just to answer it. I think it's a possibility that we can make that mark or get close to it. It's also a possibility that it'll come in somewhat under that number.
Representative Gillespie.
Just to follow up there, thank you. Do you have a percentage of people that have businesses that have applied, and how many are still in the system waiting to get funds?
I'm gonna ask Justin. I'll put him a little bit on the spot.
Justin Moorhead, Department of Revenue. I don't know that we know a percentage for SURGE. Of course, for business relief, as Commissioner kind of explained, it was targeted to certain industries, but it was based off of information that we already had in our tax system. So we were able to distribute those. We issued over 28,000 payments in that case. For SURGE, because it is an application-based program, the total number of applicants or recipients, potential recipients, is actually much lower there. So I think what we've seen, that's why we've actually left the application window open rather than closing it early. So we continue to get applications and to process those.
I think what may be helpful, sorry, Justin, is we do have current pending applications that meet the $125 million, you know, request. But it is an application-based program, and there are federal oversight requirements. It has to be documented. It's basically a reimbursement of expenses, direct expenses, or for loss of income, you know, during the period. It's an either-or alternative. And so there are sufficient applications that have been brought into the system, but it's a matter of working with the taxpayers to get that documentation in. And you know, that's where the sort of the work is, both on the taxpayer side and on the state side. So and we've had applications withdrawn where folks said, well, you know, I initially submitted it, but for whatever reason, for their circumstances, they say, I'm not going to proceed. And then we have been able to bring in new applicants to backfill. So we have sufficient applications to distribute it all, but we know that they won't all end up in a disbursement. So that's why it's really sort of difficult to predict where it's going to land at the end.
Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Garagano, a year ago, the legislature passed a bill that would require marketplace facilitators to collect sales tax on out-of-state sellers. And I believe the projection was that we would raise about $85 million in additional revenue this fiscal year. We're well into the fiscal year. Where do we stand right now with those projections, or where are we?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, thank you. So the marketplace facilitator collection requirement, as you described, went into effect for the month of October. And those would be November collections. We have collected so far I have a list here, but I don't have a subtotal. Collected for the months of October through January, 4-month period, about 35 million, roughly. I'm looking at a list, doing some in my head, but on the order of $35 million. It's been in October, for October and November, it was between 6 and 7 million. For the month of December, which included Christmas, went up to 17 million, and then in January, it's settled back at about 6.6 million for that month.
Okay, thank you for that update. And if I could ask one, I guess, unrelated question. In the state of Tennessee, when businesses do not make sufficient payments on their F&E taxes, they are assessed a penalty by the state through your office. How does that penalty compare to what the federal government would charge as a penalty for insufficient payments? Is it larger on a percentage basis by a substantial amount?
It's 5% a month and caps out at 25%. No, we reduced that. We brought a bill to reduce that penalty 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm drawing a blank on what we reduced it to. Justin?
Drawing the same blank, unfortunately. We did bring a bill to reduce it. I think that the max stayed the same, but the monthly percentage was reduced.
That's right. I think we reduced it to 2% a month, but still can max out at 24% for a year. Hopefully that was a benefit. When that bill, sort of looking back on that, we looked at other states primarily and brought it in more in line, I think, with a lot of what other states are doing at the state level. I'm going to be perfectly candid. I do not know what the federal penalty rate is. I would be more than happy to look that up and provide it after.
That'd be helpful if you would follow up with that information. I suspect, I may be wrong, but I suspect that Tennessee's penalty is much higher on a percentage basis than the federal government's, which sort of strikes me as unusual.
I'd be happy to look into that. Yes, sir.
And I want to follow up on Chairman Baum's question on the marketplace facilitator. So we had put, as I recall, about $85 million into this current year's budget. And if we had the bump in December, but I hear you saying we're averaging $6 to $7 million. Do you anticipate another bump in any month? Or if not, it looks like we would run a little bit short of that, again, recognizing that it wasn't effective for the entire fiscal year.
Madam Chair, can I back up?
You may.
I made a mistake. I was looking at the local sales tax column. Marketplace facilitator collections for state tax in October was 23.3 million. In November was 26.5 million. It jumped to 34.5 in December and back down to 25 million in January. Anybody on my team prevent me from making another mistake? Yeah, I looked at the wrong column. Those numbers did seem low.
Okay, so we are in, rather than being a shortfall, we will have an additional over budget amount from this particular bucket. Okay, I just wanted to
I do
confirm
think,
that.
if I may, Madam Chair Lady, on that, those are the numbers that have come from the marketplace facilitators. I do think it's important to note that that's not necessarily all new revenue, because we have two major things going on in sales tax. We have marketplace facilitators collecting, which we didn't have before, but we also have a very significant shift of purchasing because of the pandemic. So online sales have at least doubled. And so, there's two different things going on. It's how people are purchasing both, are they purchasing online or in the store? And then who's collecting it online? So yes, marketplace facilitators are new to collecting tax, but with that huge shift in purchasing, that's not, that a lot of, a significant amount of that may be purchases that were previously occurring in stores in Tennessee. So that's not, shouldn't be construed as all new revenue.
Just dollars moved perhaps into a different bucket.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, thank you. We're running very short on time, but I have a couple of folks with additional questions, and then Commissioner, we'll probably be sending you a couple of questions that we didn't have time for, and just ask you to respond to those in writing,
Yes, ma'am.
and we'll share with the committee. Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I just simply had a couple of comments. One, I've been very appreciative of your department and how responsive you've been, and you personally, to concerns from the business community and citizens as well about clarification on certain things over the last few years, and we're continuing to work on that. And then especially your staff, Ms. Hurt is kind of the liaison I deal with more often than not. Extremely responsive. It doesn't matter what time of day or what day of the week. Very responsive and very thorough. And I'm always I know my constituents are in good hands when I have them communicate with her. So I really appreciate your staff. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. And again, we do thank you for all that you do. How about, just for the record, how much do we give back to taxpayers in our sales tax holidays?
It's traditionally around $15 million, between 10 and $15 million, state and local. And then we reimburse local governments.
That is for all of the sales tax holidays that we do, right?
Yes, sir. That's for the annual traditional sales tax holiday that's been around for quite a number of years. There were the additional one-time holidays this year, so that wouldn't necessarily include those amounts.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Commissioner Gargano. Thank you for joining us, and I will add my thanks to Chairman Todd's. Your department's always very responsive, and responsible too. And we appreciate that so much on behalf of those sitting up here, but even more so on behalf of our constituents who have issues. And so thank you for helping walk them through those. And again, we thank you for taking the time to join us today, and look forward to hearing about some more over budget numbers to go with this other money that we have flowing down. So our challenge is how to use that wisely and appropriately. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. Appreciate it.
And we'll take just a minute for our sanitation process. And then we'll next be hearing from Commissioner Ezell with the Department of Tourist Development.
Oh, we might have to, Commissioner. Okay, it's up here. I bet we have to do it. Kevin, you might have to.
Somebody said.
Okay.
I'm assuming that's.
Say ask us.
On.
Commissioner Ezell, welcome. We're glad to have you folks here. I know it's been a tough year for tourism and along with other things in the state, but hopefully we're beginning to see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel. And as I say, we are praying that it's not an oncoming train and that we will get back on track. So with that, we'll ask you to just proceed with your presentation as succinctly as possible, so we're going to have time for questions.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair Hazelwood, Vice Chair Baum, and the members of the House Finance Ways and Means Committee. It's really a privilege to get to present our budget to you today. I am Mark Ezell, the Commissioner of Tourist Development for Tennessee. I've got some of our leadership team here, and we're going to talk about our tourism development budget request to drive back economic recovery for the state's #2 industry. So you'll see that this budget does, again, take the right step in supporting that tax-generating revenue, and that means money for all departments. So we're asking for $8 million, as you see on the first slide, to support our domestic and international marketing efforts, as well as $2.2 million to build our office sustainably of the Office of Rural Tourism and Outreach. We're adding one position to help our small rural communities with their growing tourism resources and how to help them build their economies. So I'd like to take less than 10 minutes to talk about not only our budget, but also the economic impact, some about what's been going on in our industry. As you know, it's been the most affected industry of the pandemic. And then lastly, to share how we used CARES Act funding and then how we'll be driving economic recovery, because that is our charge for you. So it seems like a long time ago, but we've not been back together to talk about our 2019 economic impact. So I'll just hit a couple of things. We were on a roll. Tennessee was not only on its 10th consecutive year of growth, but our expenditures beat the national average by 63%, largest ever. And so that $23 billion was truly, we were rolling. And then COVID hit. All of a sudden, as you know, this is a tracker that we use during the economic recovery. It's when on April 12th, when I was asked by Governor Lee to help lead the economic recovery group, spending was down 25%. This comes from Harvard and Visa. So we really needed to work quickly to restore our economy, to help the businesses operate safely, so that a number of people in our department at Tourist Development and then many others all jumped in, and we helped introduce the Tennessee Pledge with 300 industry leaders, health people that helped us get Tennesseans back to work quickly, keeping our communities safe. But really, how do we do that quickly? So Tennessee was the second state in the nation to reopen restaurants. The Bristol event was the largest event in 2020. So we showed how to do that, and really it paid off. And because of all the hard work of Tennesseans, the changes our business made to protect customers, honestly, the support we had from y'all in helping communities, we were able to get businesses open while fighting COVID-19. And we're grateful to see that Tennessee was only one of 7 states in America to have a positive change in consumer spending during that period. So we'll quickly jump to, while we had some good news with that, let's move now to the industries we support, leisure and hospitality. And what you'll see is how devastated that industry still is. And it's why this tourism sustainable budget's so important. You can see the numbers, but the revenues are still down 21% for the year, and we have unemployment. So we'll hit a couple of slides on those quickly. So last year, we were talking about the growth and how we want to deliver a lot of dollars to the state budget. Well, really, unfortunately, COVID-19 proved what happens when travel stops. And what we would tell you is, here's the numbers you're going to care about on finance, because those 3 areas are down $300 million in tax revenue for your budget and our budget. And so the good news is we're making a comeback, and you can see we've gone from these lows of down $40 and $60 million to now in the high teens, but we still have a lot of work to do. And then you'll see that in our leisure and hospitality, it's about jobs. Unfortunately, still half the jobs, 47% of all the jobs left that are unfilled are hospitality jobs. So we've got a lot of work to do, and you can see that arts and recreation, the accommodations still have challenges. It's also important for this group to notice about the differences and what's happened. And you know this because you know your constituency group. But in East Tennessee, we are actually up through November 9% from a year ago. And all the other counties led by our state parks record years, the Great Smoky Mountains, all that group were actually up. And then those who have heavy tourism dependent groups, especially around music like Nashville and Memphis, still really struggling. And that's going to be part of our job in this budget. A year ago, I talked about the diversity of the assets that we have as a brander. I'm new to state government the last couple of years and was so excited. Little did I realize just how powerful our outdoors were. We were in the top 5 most visited states during COVID. Why? Because Tennessee has amazing outdoor assets, and people came, and we tried to do that as safely as we possibly could, and it was our only non-beach state. So, along with that, because of your generosity with the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group, Governor Lee, in the fall, we were able to secure a CARES grant that allowed us to restore that tourism. We knew there were people coming in certain areas, and then we wanted to make sure everybody knew we were safe in other areas so they would come. And we were granted $25 million. $15 million we gave straight to all the destination marketing organizations in the 95 counties. It was the largest in the nation, and they needed it. They didn't even qualify for PPP. So that group got money directly that they could use during the fall to help them. We partnered with all of these that you see on the slide. And what we found was we gave no less than $25,000 to every single county in the state. And what we found is people, when they get the money, they need the technical assistance. And when together we work with that, we can use tourists to help them spend money in our communities. And that's what we're going to do with the Office of Rural Tourism and Outreach. This is going to be helping those distressed, those at risk, those smaller rural counties that really don't know how to do tourism as far as visitor spending as well as we want to. So that's what we'll be doing with the budget. And then our welcome centers, just want to give a shout out to our welcome centers that they stayed open the entire time, never closed. They continued to provide for essential travel, and they came and took care of people, provided mask kits, but also we spent CARES money to be able to communicate with visitors, and that's going to be a long term. Our campaign was for the love of Tennessee, travel safe. We had a lot of celebrities, Drew and Ellie Holcomb, 3 weeks ago. People.com picked us up again, and they did a 1,600-mile trip, and that program was so helpful in helping us not have a larger loss than we did. And as I kind of wrap up, what we're going to be doing with that $8 million is we're going to be talking about the great assets. What's exciting is we had 50 million people watch Ken Burns. COVID hit. None of those people have been able to come to Tennessee. And so we're going to get those people to come see the places and spend the money and use our hotels and restaurants and our tourist attractions. And when we got that we are going to get to do both domestically and internationally. This is an award we have to just tell you about as our next to the last or close to our end on slides. We showed you our kid reviewed campaign last year. Tennessee's lucky enough to have 35 family destinations we could promote. But that got it put into a contest, and we beat Jeep, Frito-Lay, and Google for the #1 award. You got the state of Tennessee beating these groups because of the creativity. So our department can deliver on the money that we are asking you to give us. Our vacation guide, as we wrap up, is to talk about our culinary groups because we're focusing on our eating and drinking places. It's the biggest dollar amount that we can get back for this budget. And at the end of the day, we're asking for about $10 million to drive back what we think will be $250 million is our charge to bring back to the budget for you as we inspire visitation and become the greatest non-beach tourism state in America. And if we do that, we come with the revenue, and that's what we look forward to in this budget accomplishing. Thank you, and we're open for questions.
And thank you. You took me at my word, and you were extremely succinct, and we appreciate that. We do have a number of questions. First on my list is Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. I'm really excited. You always make it exciting when you, thank you. Couple of questions, and you mentioned some of this, mere fact that out of that $25 million of CARE money that you got, you gave all 95 counties, I think 25.
Yes, sir. And what we did was we used U.S. Travel's expenditures. It's kind of that travel Bible so that it keeps up with every county's tax revenues that are attributed to travel. And so people got their percentage over the last 2 years of what they've been generating in travel expenditures. So places like Nashville got over $4 million, Memphis got over $2 million, Sevier County almost $2 million, so that the people who can use that to drive back ROI were able to do so. But no county got less than 25,000.
And I would assume that probably would have been mine because we are rural, is down in Hardeman. But tell me now, are the counties, and let me just use my county for an example, what are we required to do with that $25,000?
It was to use to be able to show how you can drive people into your marketplace in a safe, but in a visitor spending kind of way. And so our teams had to work with them. The bad news about the CARES Act funding at the time was it had to be spent by December 31st. And so those dollars did have to be spent. What's great about our department is we spent 97% of all the funds that were given to us, which I think is the highest of any of the departments. So that's the good news. The bad news is we still have programs that, can use funding and what we'll do with the budget.
Representative Shaw, your follow-up?
Thank you, and I'm going to be as brief as I can. But you're telling me then, though, the 25,000 has already been spent because it had to be spent.
Yes, sir.
So it was left up to the counties to make sure that they get that out to the citizens. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, number two, do you anticipate any additional COVID relief funds are coming?
Well, we're following along like everyone else and checking in with the administration to see what flexibility there is. And so we don't have an answer to that to know whether or not there's the opportunity to apply for CARES relief funding with the administration and the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group.
Thank you.
Yes,
and
sir.
thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I noticed in your presentation, there's $8 million for marketing and marketing activities and new initiatives. How will that funding be used and how will it be distributed? So what kind of areas and just broadly?
Yeah, well, both internationally, our international market will be coming back by this fall. And that's really important for our big cities. Because there's a certain portion of that Nashville and Memphis numbers, again, that will drive that ROI that's got to be accomplished with international. So we have a robust international program that we put on hold because people couldn't travel. So we did not spend those dollars. And then domestically, it gives us the opportunity to not only, we have some markets we've never been in. Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Pittsburgh, some of those. And in addition, a lot of these dollars, we've been spending about $4 of that $8 million every year to take care of those markets that are close by to us. And what we know is some of those markets we've never done television in, and some markets that when you got the assets we do, it is about having some more money to tell the message.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you for you and your team and all the hard work you guys are doing. What a challenging year for so many in our state, and you guys have been hit harder than anybody else. So thank you for the consistency and the perseverance of your team. A quick question about the Rural Destination Development Program. You briefly mentioned it. You're requesting $2.2 million. It includes a position and the rural and through the rural initiatives. Can you just explain a little bit more about the Rural Initiatives Office and what that's going to look like?
Absolutely. And I'd love to have our Assistant Commissioner go into a little more detail. But when I came in, what you saw is those, especially the distressed and at-risk groups and those small rurals, have very little resources in their own local communities. might be a part-time chamber person who does tourism. And so what you saw was no one was giving the time to drive the economic development part about visitor spending. And that's when we started realizing with our current dollars and our people, there was a group of 30 or 40 counties that really were not getting to work on their outdoor assets, for example. So Melanie, anything else you would like to just add? Yep.
And your name and title for the record, please,
Yes.
ma'am.
I'm Melanie Beecham. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Rural Tourism and Outreach. So again, what he said, what Commissioner said is many of these communities just quite frankly don't have the people in place. They have wonderful assets that maybe need to be developed further. They don't have budget to do marketing, branding, or even determining what their top asset would be. And so what we found was while we offer grants, we could give out money through our regular grants, but there's not someone in place to be able to really facilitate that in the way that it's needed. So one big piece of this is education. A second piece is technical assistance. And what I mean by that is we would help them with the branding specifically or design or determining what their logo is. But really, the education comes alongside of all of those pieces until we can really educate them on the ways to do this and how important the budget is in their communities and what the economic impact is of that, then they won't be successful. So we're really excited about this program and what we think we can bring to these rural communities.
One more, Madam Chair, if I may. Commissioner, if I'm not mistaken, Sevier County right now is leading the way in terms of tourism for the state. Can you speak to maybe in Middle and West Tennessee, we haven't seen those areas recover as much in respect to tourism. Can you speak to what you feel like the challenge has been in those areas where Sevier County and East Tennessee has recovered so quickly and gone beyond what we were pre-pandemic? Can you speak to Middle and West Tennessee and why we haven't seen the recovery there like we have in East Tennessee?
It's a great question. And what we saw was when you've got the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, you've got the ability to have a lot of people and be able to spread them out. When you've got a music venue that 200 people aren't willing or ready, or it's not time to be able to come in to watch a venue, you have two different business models. So Sevier County is made up of, now Dollywood had a limited effort, but outside of Dollywood, you had a lot of these smaller organizations with space to be able to take in people, and people wanted to come. And so we saw a lot of that in East Tennessee. In Nashville and Memphis, the real key is going to be our number one driver typically is out of the music side and or the event side, that business traveler, the convention traveler, those groups that right now are just starting to plan. We're seeing that market open up for summer and fall, and we got to be there ready to compete against, because there's a pent-up demand of people that are ready to get back out, see that show. We know they've got $3 trillion in savings accounts, and Tennessee wants that visitor spending to be in our marketplace, and we got the music and the assets to do it. But that's we are meeting with Memphis and Nashville every week right now to say how quickly can we work on Beale Street, how can we help get this particular asset going and ready when it's time. Yes, sir.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Commissioner. Certainly good to see you again. And
yes, sir.
I was just up over in Pigeon Forge, and I can tell you they're off to a good start this year. Holy cow, it was like July over there. So traffic is certainly back. The question I have is just doing a follow-up maybe to a question or I guess an issue that we've had in the past. $500,000 non-recurring was appropriated for grants to improve access to waterways. To improve access to waterways. Can you talk a little bit about these grants? What have we seen through this? What improvements have we seen? How many folks are actually interested in these as well?
We've had good demand. Great question. And it does come outside of this budget when that grant is chosen by y'all, but we are very supportive. What we saw are a lot of people chose, I mean, if you're a boat manufacturer, you were up 70% last year. So a lot of people chose our lakes and our streams, and we know how important that marina business is to handle those. So we think it's a tax revenue source. So again, we're just helping assist them. And Melanie, anything, Assistant Commissioner Beecham?
Sure. From the marina side, yes, certainly over the last few years, while we've had the budget, we have had
the majority of marinas in the state take advantage of it. It's a reimbursable grant. And so typically they are doing projects, infrastructure projects. It might be a parking lot. It might be expanding their put-ins. Sometimes it's the restaurant. It's really, and sometimes it's marketing. It's anything to enhance the visitor experience at their marinas. And certainly they have taken advantage of it.
Well, thank you. And that's all I have. Commissioner, we have heard from a lot of different departments and agencies, and all the commissioners and executives bring a lot to the table when they come, but I don't know that any bring the enthusiasm that you have. And I tell you, it's refreshing to see. And I felt that the first time I met you, and I can tell you it's still out there. So thank you for what you do, you and your staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a great team to get to represent.
Well, Commissioner, I don't have any other questions on my list, and Chairman Hicks stole all the good lines. But we do appreciate the work. I know, as I said in the beginning, it's been a difficult year for tourism. Have lots of friends in that industry in Chattanooga, hotels, restaurants, who have, some frankly who may not recover, particularly in the restaurant arena. There are restaurants who are closing that we may not see reopen, which is, makes me sad because some of them I really, really liked personally. Yes. But I thank you for the work that's being done, and we look forward to coming back here next year post-COVID and hearing about the great numbers that the investment, the ROI on this $10 million that you've requested, $250 million, and we wouldn't be averse to having you tell us that it was larger than that. So
sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry. I didn't look over there, I guess.
Mark.
Okay, folks, we have the Department of Veteran Services that looks like they're ready to begin, and we thank you for being available to start a bit early, and if we can gain a little time, and some of us have a 1 o'clock meeting, I wouldn't mind having 5 minutes in between. So, but Major Baker, welcome, and we will just ask you to tell us about the great things that are happening in the Department of Veteran Services.
Commissions. It's good to see all of you. Thank you for having us here today to present our FY 21-22 proposed budget. I am Tommy Baker, the interim commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Veteran Services. I want to take a moment just to introduce some of my team. To my right, your left is Budget Director Jennifer Combs. To your right is my General Counsel, Catherine Hale, our HR Director, Dolores Keene, and then David Salon in the back is our Legislative Liaison. Just want to start today by thanking everyone on this committee who has served in the past or is currently serving. Here at Veteran Services, we really appreciate and honor that service. So this first slide talks a little bit about how COVID impacted the operations of the Tennessee Department of Veteran Services, how we responded to that, and some of the mitigation efforts that have come forth from that. The top graph that you're looking at there depicts the number of claims, appeals, and inquiries that we had over 2019 and 2020. You will notice a sharp drop in the month of April and May. You'll see that normalized a bit after July and stayed normal throughout the year. It's still not back to what it was in 2019, but we think as this pandemic lessens, we'll continue to see that normalize back to what it was prior to the pandemic. There's several reasons for those numbers to drop. Obviously, VA medical centers were basically locked down from April to July. That's where 4 of our regional offices are located. That's where a lot of our incoming traffic is. So that just has a natural quelling effect on our numbers a little bit. Down below, you'll see a graph that depicts the number of burials that we've had at our 5 state cemeteries over the past 3 years. Now, that thick red line at the top is what we're currently paced to do this year. You'll see that that's trending a little higher than it did in 19 and 20. And of course, that number is not yet fulfilled. That's just through the end of January. But we're averaging right now through the end of January about 237 barrels a month, with the largest increase of that volume down in Memphis. So we think the pandemic may have contributed to this. We don't have solid facts about that yet. But what we do know is that 41% of our veteran population is represented by Vietnam era veterans or older. So we don't think this trend will subside. We think it'll continue in the same direction for some time. The next slide talks about some of the challenges that our customer faced during the pandemic and some of the things that we did to make sure that we completed our statutory requirements, which is connect veterans to the services and benefits that they've earned, as well as maintain the state cemeteries. So one of the first things we had to do during the pandemic was to establish an electronic signature method that allowed us to represent those veterans. Some forms that we just have to have that on to be able to adequately represent them. We also secured a document upload system, which allowed us to transmit digital documents, and it also allowed us to transition to a online and a phone, if you will, type of support mechanism for them. We also established some drop-off documents locations, secure drop-off document locations. There are some veterans that don't, they're not in the digital age, and so we had to make sure that we were able to service them as well. But what we did do in that contingency plan was make sure that we reduced as much exposure, unnecessary exposure as we did, both with our staff and with them as well. So the last thing we did, and I'll talk just briefly about the map. I know the map looks kind of busy, but that's really showing you State Veterans Department, our geographical footprint in terms of our field offices and our state cemeteries. And those other tri-stars that you see are kind of what grew out of our mitigation efforts. Some of our veterans, as you know, they live in remote areas of the state. They don't have access to broadband or to anything that would be a good digital network to operate from. So we partnered with our counties. As you know, we have those county service officers out there that we work hand in hand with on a normal basis anyway. So this allowed the veteran to have a virtual appeal hearing. They didn't have to drive all in to, say, a Memphis or a Nashville, get a motel room, spend their own money as they had in the past, but yet they could have a virtual appeal hearing. And it also reduced a lot of wait times on appointments and kind of expedited some of those scenarios. It seemed to be a very welcomed reality for some of our customers. It moved them along in the process a little faster than what we'd experienced in the past. So looking forward, we're going to leverage some of these new techniques. They're there for us to take and grow and try to make them even more efficient in our service delivery to our customer base. And so when we go forward also, we're going to be looking at an online scheduling for our field office veteran resource coordinators that are across the state, as well as an online scheduling process for our state cemeteries. So this is just a slide that talks about the proposed reduction plan for FY22. It's about $279,600. The only thing that should be noted about this slide really is none of these operational reductions will reduce or decrease or alter the service we provide to our veterans and their families. This slide here talks about the personnel reductions that the department experienced last FY. It shows a decrease from 110 personnel to 104. Overall, this is about 5.5% of our total personnel and workforce in Veterans Services. This next slide, the last slide, was the aggregate number and loss. This represents the funds that saved. It also talks about the slides or the positions in detail. As you can see, 3 of those positions out of the 6 were here at the headquarters in Nashville. We purposely directed that because we want our folks out in the field who are really the ones that are the front line of support to our veterans. We wanted to make sure we mitigated those losses. So we spread those other 3 losses out across the 3 regions, an admin assistant up in Mountain Home, a veteran resource coordinator here in Middle Region, and then a caretaker down at Parker's Crossroads. This slide talks about our 2 capital improvement proposed for this budget. The first one there is our West Tennessee Veterans Home down in Memphis. It is by far our busiest cemetery. It represents about 41% of all the burials we do at our 5 state cemeteries. So it is, if you've ever been there, there's some traffic flow issues with that cemetery getting in and out of there. A lot of times it's so busy that the group that's coming in with a loved one is kind of mingling with the group that's going out. And because the scheduling is really, really tight. So it needs to be restructured, some parking area added to that and to make that more accessible for those customers down there. That $21,000 you see there is just our state match. That is a federal project, which will be 100% federally reimbursed. The other one is a state project that concerns 2 stone houses that are located out at our Middle Tennessee State Veterans Cemetery out here at the edge of Pegram, Davidson County there. So those stone houses have been there since that property was purchased by the state back in the 90s. They are in complete disrepair to the point of some structural deterioration, both on the outside and starting to on the inside. So this is just some grading and some structural repairs to prevent those from completely deteriorating that's on that property. So finally, our total budget that we're asking for here today is $8,137,700 is what we're proposing this year. I'll be glad to take your questions, but that completes our presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. First on the list is Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, General, and appreciate you being here. First of all, I want to say, before I ask my question, David Sloan, and I think Dan Wozak is one of your workers in your office. They did a great job helping out one of our Vietnam veterans. When I made a request, he was charged with a hospital bill, and they worked it out with the VA and the local hospital. Great service, great team, and I just want to tell you how much I appreciate it. And I know this veteran who suffers some issues, really, y'all did great, and just want to appreciate that. And General, before I ask a question too, could you put Colonel Wendell in the front leading rest position for the rest of this?
He could do some. He's in great shape, by the way.
Okay. Sir, my question has to do with the veteran resource coordinators. Y'all requested just a little over $600,000 for salary adjustments for those individuals, and just the question is, how much are they currently paid, and how does this compare to similar positions at other organizations?
Thanks for the question. So they currently, our highest turnover rate is in our caretakers and our veteran resource coordinators. In years past, it's been as high as 40% with our caretakers. It's been as high as 20% with our veteran resource coordinators. Part of that is, obviously, those are entry-level positions, but they are very vital in completing our statutory mission. I mean, maintaining cemeteries and connecting veterans to resources and benefits, that's what we do. So, and it represents about 55% of our entire workforce, those 2 categories. So Their counterparts, our current caretaker ones are coming in around 22,000 annual salary. Their counterparts over on the VA side, we have 5 national cemeteries in the state as well, start around 30. And so quite a disparity there with just starting salaries. So we're constantly competing with keeping those folks in our fold. And then on the Veteran Resource Coordinator side, they start out at around 28 a year annually. And their counterparts on the federal level start out around 40. So quite a disparity there in starting salary. And we're just trying to get that a little closer with our proposal. So that we can, utilize that as part of our talent management program. That's not everything, obviously, but it is vital to us, keeping that continuity that we'd like to achieve.
Thank you. And I know Chairman Kevin Vaughn, has legislation when situations come up where we lose an active duty soldier, Guard, Reserve, active duty, and accommodate the families on weekend burial requests. I'm glad to see you there to give that perspective. And again, I'm just glad to have you on board, and I appreciate your team. You got a great one. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Chairman Wendell, your name was called.
First of all, I want to thank you for your service in the Armed Forces of the United States. It's appreciated, not overlooked. And I can testify that among your subordinates, you're a respected and capable leader and also a decent person. And that's not overlooked either. And we appreciate you, or those that work for you appreciate you, which I'm one. But I've got one question for you, General Baker. In 2021, the proposed budget included $168,000 for 3 positions for your department. 2 were appeals advocate position, and 1 was a cemetery caretaker for the West Tennessee Cemetery. They were not funded in the final budget due to the pandemic. First question, is there still a need for these positions? And a follow-up, should we expect a request for those positions in the future?
Okay, so I'll take that last one first, and because it was resolved within the department. The caretaker, we took a caretaker from Parker's Crossroad, which is our least volume of burials. It's in a rural area, and moved that position down to West Tennessee. So that took care of that. The other 2 appeal positions, when the Appeals Modernization Act was passed in 2017, it was designed basically to, unstop the waiting line at the appeals, at the Veterans Board of Appeals level. And it gave veterans some options that they didn't have previously. It really was designed to increase appeals and to get that docket way down. And it did such. So that act passed in 17, and 18 and 19, we seen our appeals numbers go from 231 to 531, around a 244% increase. So when they came in prior to the pandemic last year proposing 2 appeals advocates, we kind of did some projections there, and we thought, well, if it increases in 20 and 21 like it did in 18 and 19, we're going to be up around 700 and something appeals a year, which would have overwhelmed our appeal staff. So that's why we asked for it in 20. So the pandemic comes along, the VA kind of puts a halt on medical centers, and appeals division shut down for a temporary period until we got this virtual appeal set up and running. So our numbers are more like they were 2 years ago this year. Now that, post-pandemic, those may go back to what we was seeing as a trend develop those first 2 years after that act had been passed. And if it does, we may be having to readdress that as we go forward. But that's why we didn't ask this year. The numbers were more like they were before the act had passed, or had not increased the way we thought they would.
I just want to reiterate that all of us deal with veterans in Tennessee, and veterans, including myself, are fortunate to have an advocate for other veterans in Tennessee like this gentleman, and I hope he continues to stay on the job.
Thank you, Chairman Wendell. And I'm just going to take this opportunity. The Comptroller's Office put together a document. Every member should have it. There's a snapshot, just a 2-pager that talks about what we do in Tennessee for our veterans. And then there's an extensive brochure that goes into detail. And I would encourage all of you to take a look at this. And when you hear from your veterans, a lot of programs, as you look through that brochure, you'll see a lot of programs that aren't being utilized. So we maybe need to do a better job of communicating what we have done to help our veterans so they'll know to access those. But I'm very proud of what we do in the state of Tennessee for our veterans. Obviously, we can never do enough because of the sacrifices that they and their families have made on our behalf. But I think Tennessee, we're not called a volunteer state for nothing. We recognize that we have people who volunteer on a daily basis to do very difficult work. But I'm proud that we make every attempt to make sure that we do the best we can to care for those folks once they're back home and living amongst us. So with that commercial message, I'll move on to Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Thank you, General, for being here. First of all, I want to say thanks as well, but the partnership we have with our local county services office is really important as it relates to making sure that we meet the needs of our local veterans. So I appreciate the service and collaborative work that you do. I know in 2020, the budget included the purchase of a new Upper Cumberland Veterans Cemetery. It's my understanding that the land has been found and purchased. Could you give us a quick update? Some of our members might not know, but just adjacent to where the property is in Speaker Sexton's district, still one of the highest per capita locations for World War II veterans. And so it's pretty amazing. There is unfortunately going to be a great need for that in the Upper Cumberland area coming up. But I was hoping maybe you could give us a quick update.
Yes, sir. I was out there this past Friday. In fact, we were up there meeting with the Upper Cumberland Cemetery Association. By the way, that started at the grassroots level, which is always the best place to start things. And they got out, raised a lot of money. They were talking Friday about different things they wanted to do, fundraisers for different things they wanted there at the new cemetery. It's just outside of Sparta, just east of Sparta. I mean, you can throw a rock from the city limits and hit it. Great piece of land, about 127 acres. The pre-grant money has already been approved. We will submit the grant application this fall and compete hopefully at the national level for that to take place. I don't know what I would hate to speculate as to when we'll break ground down there, but the land has been purchased. It's going to serve about 12 counties up there, one distressed county, Pickett County, and what it also does is it achieves one of our strategic goals. So we want within the state a national or state-run cemetery for veterans within 75 miles of every home of record of a Tennessee veteran. When that cemetery is completed, we will have accomplished that goal. So it's great. I know that's your area up there, and it's a lot of areas that it'll serve in and around there. But it's just going to be a great accomplishment for the department and for the veterans of the state.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, General, thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to the veterans of the state of Tennessee. Two questions. One on since you're talking about the veterans purchasing land for veterans homes and cemeteries and the like, could you give us an update on the West Tennessee veterans home?
Yes, Representative. The one down in Arlington.
Yes.
I think you're referencing. So it has as well. The pre-grant state match has been already certified. It will go in competition for those federal grant dollars this fall as well. So right now that construction document is in approval stage. Looks like it's moving along swiftly. We're gonna have to go back and do some work to the access road in there. We're working with SBC on that, and I think there's some rezoning that's got to occur that shouldn't be an issue. But that's another great plus, because as you well know, that's the largest veteran population in the county, speaking for the whole state down there in Shelby County. So that'll be well received.
Thank you. I appreciate the update. And then there's been a lot of backlog for our West Tennessee cemetery. And so could you give us an update on that? I get a lot of calls from people on that.
I appreciate that. I have sent out a letter a couple of months ago, kind of what we were doing to mitigate that. That early January, we were hearing that wait times were as high as 4 weeks. And we didn't have really a set standard in an department, but I talked to the assistant commissioners and I said, I just don't think that's reasonable or prudent. I think we need to, outside of 10 days, we need to try to do something with that. So we started working with our local funeral homes down there. We were averaging around 6 barrels a day. Through our mitigation efforts, a couple of weeks ago, we actually had 15 barrels a day for about a week to catch up. So we have mitigated that down to now where anything outside of that 10-day business window is at the request of the family. So it took a lot of effort. We were able to move our caretakers from Parker's Crossroads down there and help out some. We sent also our cemetery director from Parker's Crossroads and East Tennessee at John Sevier down to help. We've got a new director down there, Mr. Rodney Shaw, that just took over at the West Tennessee Veterans Cemetery about a month ago. So I hope you can get by to meet Rodney. He's come over from Department of Safety and he's doing a great job. But it is by far our busiest cemetery. So we're watching it. We're going to stay on top of that and appreciate the representation down there helping us stay aware of that.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Your department was very helpful for a constituent who was on active duty and came home, and it was just taking such a long time, and they were able to help move it up so we didn't have to keep extending his leave. So I really appreciate the work and the support that you all gave on that effort. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I would be remiss if I didn't follow up with the question about the West Tennessee Veterans Home with request for a progress report on the Bradley County Veterans Home. It's in my backyard.
Yes, Chair Lady. We was up there a couple weeks ago, in fact, looking at that. The construction is about 40% complete right now. We're hoping to have a construction finished around next January, February if everything goes as planned. The grant money match is already there, as you will know, and it's in construction phase. And so, if everything goes good, Mayor Brooks was actually there that day that we got to tour the ground. And it looks like, if we get done in January, we'll start staffing. Hopefully, we'll be ready to open that up next summer sometime.
Thank you.
Thank you, General. General, basically, 22,000, I guess your employees for working cemeteries are competing with McDonald's, I'd say. Is that right?
I don't know comparatively speaking to that, but yeah, I would say that's probably close.
And how much of a raise is proposed? You may have mentioned it.
So we're wanting to take them up to 29, just under 30,000, from 22,000 up to just under 30 as a starting salary.
Okay. If I could, Madam Chair, just last week at my Rotary Club, I got a text from General Jim Reed, and he had sent me a text. He said the sign over at Couchville Pike 840 for Sergeant Asbury Hahn was damaged, and Sergeant Asbury Hahn was my coworker I trained at Nissan. Sadly, he was killed in Iraq. But I took my phone and I just showed the text to my guy sitting beside me, who was the town manager of Smyrna, Brian Hercules, and immediately he texted Public Works with Smyrna and had someone TDOT. But I didn't think about it until later. His own nephew, Russell Hercules, was killed in Afghanistan. So I just want to thank Town Manager Smyrna and Colonel Jim Reed for caring about that sign where many people may just drive by and not think nothing about it. So thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And General, thank you again for your service, as you heard several times with us. When you started talking about scheduling for cemeteries, I thought you had a direct pipeline to the Lord and Savior up there, but obviously it's for burials, not for death, is what it is. So, the quiet over the room. As we're talking about state
Stop
cemeteries.
digging, sir. You're in a deep hole.
So we're talking about state cemeteries. I appreciate that. And in Greene County, National Cemetery is full, where President Andrew Johnson is buried. It's been operational for 150 years now, and the National Cemetery is closed. We've got some properties, Green Valley properties that we've talked about for years, and I just put that as you talk about grassroots efforts for other state cemeteries. That certainly is something that our community would embrace, as you talked about having a state cemetery within 75 miles of every veteran. It would certainly serve, although there's a national cemetery in Washington County, but it would certainly serve 9 counties in the region of Northeast Tennessee very well. So I would like to put that on your radar screen.
That's a great point, and we acknowledge that. We realize that as well as that area up there somewhere would probably be a great site, down the road for a veteran's home as well, in some area up in that area. So we acknowledge that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lady.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, General. I appreciate you so much. I just wanted to get a quick update on the Parker's Crossing Garden. We talked, it's so beautiful. It catches my eye every time I pass there. And I'd have to give kudos to past Representative Steve McDaniel because he worked hard on that. But can you just give us an update on how many employees you got out there now and how things are going?
So we have a cemetery director, Mr. Eddie Long. I don't know if you've met Eddie or not. He has an administrative district assistant, and then we have a foreman, a heavy equipment operator, and then 3 cemetery caretakers. So about 7 folks total. It's the least busiest of our cemeteries. It is a beautiful cemetery right there on the interstate, but it's in a rural area, and so it's just not as busy as, say, Middle Tennessee State Cemetery or Memphis.
Well, I thank you so much, and we thank you for that particular area out there. It's been good for West Tennessee in so many ways. We don't have to drive all the way back to Nashville or Memphis, and we appreciate that. By the way, I know Rodney Shaw. When you see him, you just tell him if he gives you any trouble, you call me.
I appreciate that, Representative.
Commissioner, I think we probably need to clarify something for the record. When we were talking about the raises just a few minutes ago, that was I believe that was in your budget request, but I don't believe that's in the governor's proposed budget at this time.
That's correct.
So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that. All right, I don't have any other questions on my list. Again, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate the work that your department does to, coordinate and make sure that, again, the veterans who have served the state and this nation very well are taken care of. And we thank you for all that you do in that regard. Committee, we are back in session. We don't have anything else on our calendar for today, which is a really good thing because we're totally out of time. Do we have any further business before the committee? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.
So finish real quick. Y'all finish. Y'all wrap up. You stay in here. they ain't finished. Unless they finish.
No. Que termines aquí y que te vayas a trabajar. Oh, no problem.
Finish in here. Oh, Roxanne. If they are finished, you just take the outside position. If they are finished in here, you just take the outside.
Outside, how about that?
Okay?
No inside.
If they are finished, I don't know if they finished. If they, I'm trying to see now.
Okay. You say.
I'm gonna ask her.
Yes.
Are you guys finished? You know, just take them.
Someone else put it in her. Until two. Yeah.
I finished until 2, so you just take the outside.
Okay.